The six of them came out of nowhere. One second, Marcus Hale was standing beside his motorcycle outside the Hollow Creek Diner, reaching into his jacket for his keys. The next, they surrounded him. 6 men, leather cuts, the kind of silence that meant nobody around them was going to intervene. The parking lot went still. A trucker pretended to check his phone. A family of 4 reversed slowly back toward the highway. Everyone made a calculation. Everyone decided the math didn't work in their favor. Everyone except the woman in scrubs, who had just finished a 12-hour shift and wanted nothing more than coffee and a seat that wasn't moving. She walked toward them instead of away. 8 seconds later, 3 men were on the ground, 2 were backing off, and 1 was pressed against the side of his own motorcycle, wondering how a nurse had just dismantled his entire evening. Nobody at the Hollow Creek Diner knew her name yet, but they were all about to find out exactly who Lena Carter was, and why the people who underestimated her always ended up regretting it. If you're watching this story unfold, do me a favor, follow along until the very end, hit like, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Let's go. The Hollow Creek Diner sat at the intersection of 2 roads that both went somewhere disappointing. It was the kind of place that had laminated menus and coffee that came in a pot that was always slightly too hot or completely cold, nothing in between. Truckers stopped there because the parking was wide enough to turn an 18-wheeler around. Locals stopped there because the pie was genuinely good, even if nothing else was. Lena Carter stopped there because it was 17 miles from Drumlin County Regional Hospital, and her apartment was 22, and she had learned a long time ago that the only thing worse than a long shift was a long drive home on an empty stomach. She pulled her 10-year-old Civic into the gravel lot just past 9 in the evening. The lot was half full. 3 semis parked in a row along the far fence, a few pickup trucks, a minivan with a cracked taillight, and a single custom motorcycle that looked like it had been built by someone who cared about each individual part. She noticed the bike the way she noticed most things, quickly, cataloged, stored. It was cobalt blue with steel hardware and handlebars that curved like parentheses. It was also the most expensive thing in the parking lot by a significant margin. The diner's neon sign buzzed softly above the door. Lena pushed inside, pulled off her hospital badge and tucked it into her jacket pocket and slid onto a stool at the counter. Her scrubs were wrinkled. Her sneakers had a small blood stain on the left toe from a patient who had insisted he was fine right up until he wasn't. Her ponytail had given up somewhere around the 6th hour of the shift. "Coffee?" the woman behind the counter asked. Her name tag said Dolores, and her tone said she had asked that question 10,000 times and would ask it 10,000 more before she retired. "Please," Lena said, "and whatever's left of the cherry pie if there's any." "There's peach." "That's fine." Dolores poured the coffee and disappeared toward the back. Lena wrapped both hands around the mug and let herself breathe. She had spent the last 12 hours moving between a construction worker with a fractured femur, an elderly woman whose potassium levels had gone dangerously low, and a teenager who had come in pale and shaking after a car accident and needed more reassurance than medical intervention. The ER at Drumlin County had 42 beds and was perpetually running at 63% above comfortable capacity. Tonight had been typical. Every night was typical. That was the problem. She was on her second sip when she heard the motorcycles. Not one. Multiple. She counted the engine sounds before she looked up. 4, maybe 5, rumbling into the lot with the kind of deliberate noise that was designed to announce something. She turned on the stool and looked through the window. 6 of them. Different bikes, none of them as carefully built as the blue one already parked outside. The riders killed their engines and dismounted with practiced casualness, the way men moved when they were performing being relaxed rather than actually being it. Lena had seen that posture before. In a different context, in a different life, she had learned to take that particular posture seriously. She watched them group around the blue motorcycle. One of them, tall, wide shoulders, a red bandana knotted at his wrist, crouched beside it and ran his hand along the tank without asking permission. The others spread out in a loose perimeter, not surrounding the bike, surrounding the space. The owner of the bike came out of the diner's restroom hallway a moment later. He was in his mid-50s, maybe older, heavy-set, with a gray beard trimmed close and hands that were scarred in the specific way of someone who had spent decades working with metal. He stopped when he saw them. His face didn't show panic. It showed something worse, recognition. He knew exactly what this was. "Nice night," the tall one said. He didn't stand up from beside the bike, just stayed crouched there, touching something that wasn't his. "Victor." The older man's voice was flat. "I told you I wasn't interested. And I told you," Victor Raines straightened slowly, "that interested wasn't really the point." Inside the diner, 3 people were watching through the window. 2 of them looked away almost immediately. The trucker at the booth near the door pulled out his phone and appeared to find something very important on the screen. Dolores set down the peach pie in front of Lena and said quietly, "That's been coming a while." Lena looked at her. "You know him?" "Marcus Hale. He's been coming in here for years." Dolores lowered her voice further. "Those others started showing up about a month ago, asking questions about him. We called the county sheriff's office once." She paused. "They said they'd look into it." The inflection made clear they had not looked into it. Lena turned back to the window. Outside, Marcus Hale was standing his ground, but his footing was off. He kept his weight back, his hands out slightly. It was a posture she recognized. Not aggression, negotiation, buying time without buying anything they were actually selling. Victor was talking now. She couldn't hear the words through the glass, but she could read the conversation well enough. Victor gestured to the bike. Marcus shook his head. Victor's smile didn't move. He said something to the men around him, and 2 of them stepped closer. "Anyone called the police?" Lena asked. "I can," Dolores said. "Do that." Lena stood, left her jacket on the stool, and walked out. The air outside smelled like diesel and dry grass. The gravel crunched under her sneakers as she came around the corner of the building. The group hadn't noticed her yet. They were arranged with their backs to the door, focused on Marcus, who was now backed against his bike with nowhere to go without going through one of them. She walked toward them at a pace that was neither hurried nor hesitant, just forward. One of Victor's men noticed her first. He was standing at the edge of the perimeter, and he turned with an expression that moved from alert to dismissive in under a second. Scrubs. Sneakers. A nurse with a ponytail. His entire posture relaxed. "Hey," he said. "Wrong night for takeout, sweetheart. Get back inside." She didn't stop walking. "I'm serious. There's nothing here for you." "I'm just going to my car," Lena said. Even, calm, conversational. She moved at a mild angle that took her closer to Marcus's position rather than away from it. Victor turned. He looked her over with the same quick read his man had done. The uniform, the rubber-soled shoes, the hospital badge outline in her jacket pocket. Whatever threat assessment process he had, she did not pass the threshold. "Lady," he said, and his voice was almost patient, the way a person is patient with something they don't consider capable of inconvenience. "I'm going to tell you once because you look like you've had a long day. Walk back inside, drink your coffee, and pretend this parking lot doesn't exist." "He okay?" Lena asked. She was looking at Marcus. Marcus's eyes moved to her. There was something in them. Not relief exactly. More like the calculation of a man who was deciding whether this made things better or worse. "You should go inside," he said. "See?" Victor spread his hands. "Even the man agrees." "My car's the Civic," Lena said, still moving. "Over there. I just need to get past you." She was close now, closer than they expected. Victor's posture shifted. Not alarm, just mild irritation at someone who wasn't reading the room properly. He stepped into her path. Not aggressively, just blocking. "You're not listening," he said. "I heard you," she said. What happened in the next 8 seconds was not dramatic in the way the witnesses later described it. There was no speech. No warning. The man to Victor's left had grabbed her arm. She had seen him starting to reach before his hand was fully extended, and her response was already calibrated before contact was made. The grab became a redirect, his own momentum turning against his shoulder joint in a way that required him to either step forward to relieve the pressure or discover what happens when you don't. He stepped forward and went to one knee. The second man who moved toward her received an elbow against the nerve cluster above his knee, which dropped his leg, which dropped him. Victor himself reached for her and got her forearm in a block that struck the inside of his wrist with enough force to leave the hand temporarily unreliable. And then she stepped back, putting distance between herself and all of them, and said, "I need you to stop." Her voice was the same tone it had been the entire time, even, specific. 3 of them were on the ground. 2 had backed off involuntarily. Victor was shaking out his wrist with an expression that had moved a long distance from patience. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Victor looked at her. Really looked this time, the way he hadn't before. And whatever he saw there was different from a nurse in scrubs. His jaw tightened. "Who the hell are you?" "Somebody who's going to need you to step away from this man's property," Lena said. "The sheriff's office has already been called. You've got maybe 4 minutes." It wasn't true. Dolores had called maybe 90 seconds ago. But 4 minutes sounded more specific, and specificity implied surveillance. And surveillance implied someone had already been watching this lot before tonight. The calculation ran across Victor's face in real time. He looked at his men, the 2 who were back on their feet, the one who was still testing whether his knee worked correctly. He looked at Marcus. He looked at Lena. "This isn't done," he said to Marcus. His voice was quiet now. More dangerous for being quiet. "I know," Marcus said. Victor walked back to his bike. The others followed. They didn't peel out or rev their engines to make a point. They just left, which was worse. People who made exits for effect were performing anger. People who left calmly were filing it away. Lena stood in the gravel and watched them go. Marcus let out a breath that seemed to have been held for considerably longer than the last 8 seconds. "That was—" He stopped. Tried again. "I don't know what that was." "You're not hurt?" "No." He pushed off the bike. "You?" "I'm fine." She was already assessing, her wrist where she'd made contact, her knee where she'd pivoted, everything functional. She'd have some bruising tomorrow, but nothing she hadn't had before. "Who are you?" he asked. "Lena Carter. I was just trying to get coffee." He looked at her for a moment. Then he did something she didn't expect. He laughed. Not a relieved laugh or a polite one. Something genuine, with actual weight behind it. The kind of laugh that only comes out when the alternative is something considerably darker. "Just trying to get coffee," he repeated. "Right." The sheriff's deputy arrived 11 minutes later, which was a fact Lena noted and filed without comment. The deputy was young, maybe 26, and he walked through the parking lot with his thumbs in his belt and his eyes on the gravel. He took Lena's statement first, which she gave in the same even tone she used for everything. He wrote it down with the expression of a person who was deciding how much paperwork this was going to generate. "Victor Raines," the deputy said when Marcus gave the name. Something shifted in his posture. "You sure?" "I've been sure for 6 weeks," Marcus said. "I reported it, twice." "Mr. Hale, I understand, but Victor Raines has friends," Marcus said. "I know, I've noticed." The deputy looked at his notepad, then at Lena. "And you said you used what exactly? Self-defense?" "I used what was necessary to stop someone from grabbing me," Lena said. "Is there a legal issue with that?" "No, ma'am. I'm just—" He glanced at his notes again. 3 men. They moved toward me. The deputy wrote something down. He took pictures of the parking lot and collected Lena's contact information. Then he drove away, and Lena stood there watching his taillights, and understanding that nothing consequential had just happened from a bureaucratic perspective. Inside, her coffee was cold, and the peach pie was still there. She sat back down at the counter and ate the pie because she had paid for it and because she was genuinely hungry. Marcus came in and took the stool beside her. Dolores poured him coffee without being asked. "You've been reporting this for 6 weeks," Lena said. Not a question. "Since he first approached me about the bike." Marcus wrapped his hands around the mug. His knuckles were scarred. "Old work, not tonight's. He collects bikes, specifically bikes built by specific people. And when the person says no," he shrugged. He makes not saying no more persuasive. "What does he actually want with your bike?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "It's not about the bike," he said. "Not anymore." He looked at his coffee. "I run a program for veterans. We rebuild motorcycles together. It's mechanical work, it's focus, it's something to put their hands on when everything else feels like it's underwater. Victor's been moving contraband through some of the same channels I use to source parts. He wants me gone because I keep records, and my records are inconveniently detailed." Lena looked at him. "You have documentation." "I have documentation." "Does the sheriff's office know that?" "The sheriff's office," Marcus said carefully, "has a complicated relationship with what they know and what they act on when Victor Raines is involved." She understood that without needing more explanation. Small county, established interests. A man with enough money and enough reach that the math kept coming out in his favor. She had seen versions of this before. In other places, in different shapes, the core of it was always the same. The people whose job it was to intervene, calculating whether the intervention was worth what it would cost them. The documentation, she said. Where is it? Somewhere secure. He looked at her sidelong. Why? Because if 6 of his people just showed up and it escalated to the point where someone had to be physically stopped, the timeline is moving faster than it was yesterday. Marcus was quiet. He drank his coffee. Outside, a semi pulled out of the lot, its headlights sweeping briefly through the window. Who are you? He asked again. And I mean that differently than I did before. Lena set down her fork. I'm an ER nurse at Drumlin County Regional. And before that was before that, she said. It doesn't matter. But Marcus Hale had spent enough years around people with specific histories to know what specific silence sounded like. He didn't push. He just nodded, the way a person nods when they're deciding to be patient. She drove home that night through the kind of quiet that settles on rural roads after 9. The radio was off. She rolled the window down a few inches and let the night air come in. She had not planned on any of that. She had been planning on coffee and pie and the 20-minute drive home where she could let the shift fall away and become the next morning's problem. She had been planning on a shower and 6 hours of sleep and the Tuesday rotation starting at 6:45. Instead, she had used skills she had spent 4 years deliberately not using, in a parking lot, in front of witnesses, with 3 men on the ground and one of them being someone whose name made a sheriff's deputy's posture change. She wasn't afraid. That wasn't quite the right word for what she felt. She was alert in the way she got alert when a situation wasn't finished, when she could feel the remaining threads, still loose, still moving. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail and kept driving. At home, she showered and changed. She reheated the last of a lentil soup she had made on Sunday. She sat at the kitchen table and ate it and did not look at her phone until she was finished. One voicemail. She played it. Ms. Carter, my name is Special Agent Diane Olwell, FBI, Nashville Field Office. I'd appreciate a call back at your earliest convenience. A pause. We have you on camera from tonight's incident at the Hollow Creek Diner. I'd like to talk. Lena set the phone face down on the table. She was quiet for a moment. Then she picked it up and dialed the number. What? Drumlin County Regional Hospital's emergency department ran on a rotation that meant Lena was back there by 6:52 the next morning, which was 8 minutes before she was technically required to be. She had developed the habit years ago. Arrive early, read the board, understand what's already in motion before you're officially responsible for it. The ER at night ran differently than the ER in the day, and the handoff between shifts was where things went wrong if you weren't paying attention. The charge nurse on nights was a man named Gerald, who had 15 years on Lena and a perpetual expression of mild suffering that she had learned to read as his default rather than a signal of anything specific. He handed her the board and said, 3 pending labs, the chest pain in Bay 4 is probably going home, and Dr. Ashworth wants to talk to you about the femur from last week. The post-op follow-up? Just talk to him when you get a chance. He said it wasn't urgent, but he said it the way he says things when it is. She took the board. Gerald went home. Dr. Philip Ashworth was the head of orthopedic surgery, which was technically not the ER's department, which meant his relationship with Lena was technically peripheral. In practice, he showed up in the ER's business whenever he felt like it, which was whenever a bone was involved or whenever he wanted to make a point. He was 54, had perfect posture, and had the professional confidence of a man who had never had a reason to question whether his opinion was the most important one in the room. He found her at the medication station at 8:15. It's Ms. Carter. He had a specific way of saying her name, not unfriendly, but weighted, the way a professor says a student's name when they're about to explain something the student got wrong. Dr. Ashworth, Gerald said you wanted to talk about the Walker follow-up. In a moment, he picked up a chart that wasn't his, looked at it briefly, set it down. I heard about your incident last night, the diner. She looked at him. Word travels? Deputy Haverford is married to our OR coordinator. Small county. He tilted his head slightly. 3 men, apparently. You sent 3 men to the ground. They moved toward me. Yes. He said it with a very particular neutrality. I'm not questioning the self-defense component. I'm saying that the hospital's position is that staff involved in public incidents of a physical nature, however justified, creates liability questions. I wasn't on duty. You were in scrubs. She looked at him steadily. Are you telling me I should have walked away? I'm telling you that HR is going to want to talk to you, and that I think you should be prepared for that conversation. He straightened. I'm also telling you personally that whatever training produced those particular results is something I'm curious about. It was a long time ago, Lena said. I'm sure it was. He picked up his actual chart, the one he had come for. Walker's femur is healing well. You caught the complication before it became one. That's good work. He turned to leave. Talk to HR this afternoon. Today, not tomorrow. She watched him go and thought about the specific shape of that conversation, what he was warning her about versus what he was actually saying. Philip Ashworth was not a cruel man. He was an institutional one. There was a difference, and it mattered. The HR conversation could wait until after the FBI one. Special Agent Diane Olwell arrived at the hospital at 11:30. She was in her early 40s, plain clothes, and she carried herself with the specific economy of movement that Lena recognized from a different professional culture. She identified herself to the front desk and asked for a quiet room. The front desk gave her a small consultation room off the main waiting area, which had 2 chairs, a small table, and a window that looked into an interior hallway. Lena came in and closed the door. Thank you for coming in, Olwell said. You said you wanted to talk. I do. Olwell had a folder, which she opened without fanfare. I'm going to start by being direct. We've had Victor Raines under surveillance for 14 months. Last night's incident at the Hollow Creek Diner was captured on the parking lot camera and on the dash cam of a vehicle we had in the lot. She looked at Lena. You were not the subject of our surveillance. You were unexpected. I was getting coffee. I believe that. Olwell turned a page. What I need to understand is your background. You used a set of techniques in that parking lot that are not, and I want to be careful here, not typical, not self-defense class typical, not even advanced civilian training typical. Lena folded her hands on the table. You have an interesting service record, Ms. Carter, Olwell continued. Or rather, parts of it are interesting. Other parts are, she paused, unavailable to me at my current clearance level. Then you know what you need to know, Lena said. Olwell looked at her for a moment. I know that you left the military 8 years ago. I know you had a career in emergency field medicine before that. I know that your separation was voluntary and that it was preceded by a series of deployments that are currently classified. She closed the folder. I also know that you've been working in the ER here for 3 years and that your supervisor describes you as, quote, excellent at staying calm when everything is actively on fire. That's the job? It's also something else. Olwell set her hands on the table. We need Marcus Hale's documentation. He's been resistant to engaging with us directly, understandably, given his experience with local law enforcement in this county. But last night changed the timeline. Victor Raines escalated publicly. That's a risk he doesn't usually take, which means something is moving faster on his end than we realized. Lena considered this. What do you need from me? Marcus Hale trusts you. You stopped his car from being taken apart or worse last night in front of him without any backup or prior arrangement. That's, Olwell paused. That's significant. We need to talk to him, and we need him to cooperate. We think he's more likely to do that if someone he already trusts is part of the conversation. You want me to facilitate? I want you to consider it. Olwell's tone was precise. She wasn't asking in the way that disguised a demand. She was actually asking. You don't owe us anything. You weren't involved in this before last night. If you say no, this conversation didn't happen. Lena looked at the window into the interior hallway. A nurse she vaguely recognized pushed a medication cart past. The ordinary machinery of a hospital morning moving on its own schedule. She thought about Marcus Hale's hands around a coffee mug at 11 at night. The laugh that wasn't quite relief. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of reports and documentation, and a deputy whose posture changed at the mention of a name. Set up a meeting, she said. Somewhere that isn't this hospital and isn't anywhere connected to Raines's network. Olwell nodded. She closed the folder. One more thing, she said. Last night, after you stopped 3 individuals who outweigh you by a combined 300 pounds, you told Rains the sheriff had been called and gave him a 4-minute window. Yes. Dolores Patton, the diner employee, had called about 90 seconds prior. I know. So you lied. I gave him information that served the desired outcome, Lena said. He believed it because it was specific and confident. That's not lying, that's calibrated communication. Olwell looked at her for a long moment. Then she stood, picked up the folder and said, "Welcome to the conversation, Ms. Carter." The meeting with Marcus happened the following evening, in the back room of a hardware store owned by a former Army captain named Dale Fremont, who had done 3 tours and currently sold PVC pipe and paint with the same focused competence he had brought to everything else. The room smelled like sawdust and machine oil. Folding chairs had been arranged around a card table that had seen better decades. Marcus came in with the wariness of a man who had learned that trust was a resource you spent carefully. He looked at Olwell, then at Lena. "You vouching for this?" he asked her. "I'm here," she said. "That's what I can tell you." It was, she understood, both less and more than an answer. Marcus turned it over for a moment. Then he sat down. He produced a USB drive from his jacket pocket and set it on the table with the deliberateness of someone who had spent time deciding whether to do that. 4 years of purchase records, he said. Supplier contacts, delivery schedules, invoicing that doesn't match what was actually shipped. The contraband is running through motorcycle parts distributors. The legitimate businesses provide cover, and Rains has at least 2 logistics managers on the inside. He looked at Olwell. "I also have 3 witnesses who are willing to talk if they're protected. They won't talk without that." "We can arrange protection," Olwell said. "You can arrange it," Marcus said. "The question is whether it actually holds." "These things take time to—" "I know how long things take," Marcus said. His voice didn't rise. It just got quieter, which Lena recognized as its own kind of temperature change. "I know exactly how long things take, and I know what happens in that time to people who are waiting. I need something concrete, not a process, not a timeline, something I can point to and say, this is what protection looks like." Olwell looked at him. Then she said, 72 hours. I can have federal protective status on all 3 witnesses within 72 hours. 60, Marcus said. A pause. 60. Marcus looked at the USB drive on the table. He looked at Lena. She held his gaze and didn't say anything, because there was nothing to say. He had made his decision before he walked in the door. She understood that. The conversation in front of her was the formality of it. He nodded. Olwell picked up the drive. Lena was back in the ER by 7 the next morning. She moved through the shift with the same mechanical focus she always brought to it. Labs, medication checks, the teenage boy with a broken wrist who cried with relief when she told him it was a clean break and would heal completely, the elderly woman with pneumonia who grabbed her hand and held it for a moment longer than necessary, and whom Lena allowed to do that because some things couldn't be rushed. At 2 in the afternoon, Gerald found her in the supply room. "Ashworth is looking for you," he said. "And also there are 2 men in suits in the waiting room asking for you. One of them showed the desk clerk a badge." Lena counted back the hours. The timeline was moving, and it was moving faster than Olwell had indicated. She closed the supply cabinet. "Tell the men in suits I'll be out in 5 minutes." "Should I be worried?" Gerald asked. "About me?" "No." She turned. "About the supply inventory? Probably always." She walked out of the supply room and down the corridor toward the waiting area, and she was halfway there when her pager went off. Hospital code, not hers specifically, but the general alert for an incoming trauma, multiple casualties, ETA 4 minutes. She stopped at the junction of 2 hallways. Suits in the waiting room. Trauma incoming. Ashworth somewhere in the building with HR concerns and the specific professional weight of an institution protecting itself. 4 years of documentation on a drive that was now in FBI custody. 3 witnesses who would need to hold their nerve for 60 hours. Victor Rains, who had driven away calmly from a parking lot and filed something away. The trauma alert sounded again. Lena turned toward the ER. The suits could wait. The suits, in her professional judgment, could always wait. But whoever was coming through those ambulance doors in 4 minutes, they could not. She pushed through into the bay, pulled on gloves, and was already reading the incoming report when the first set of doors opened and the paramedics came through with a gurney and on the gurney was a face she recognized. Marcus Hale. Eyes closed, a gash above his left eye still bleeding through the gauze. Oxygen mask. One of the paramedics was calling out vitals while the other held pressure on something at his side that Lena's eyes went to immediately and her hands were already moving toward before the gurney had fully stopped. "What happened?" she said. "Found him on Route 7, the paramedic said. Single vehicle, ran off the road. No other cars involved. But the injuries don't match the vehicle damage." She looked at the injuries. She looked at the vehicle damage report on the intake sheet. The paramedic was right. This wasn't an accident. She didn't have time to process what that meant. Not yet. "Bay 2, she said, and the gurney was already moving. The next 22 minutes were the kind that collapsed time. Not in a good way, not in the flow state way people romanticized about emergency medicine, but in the relentless mechanical way where the clock and the body were in direct negotiation, and there was no room for anything outside that transaction. Marcus had 2 broken ribs, a laceration above his eye that had bled dramatically but wasn't the problem, and a deeper wound along his left side that the paramedic had been holding pressure on. The wound pattern was wrong for a steering wheel, wrong for a windshield, wrong for any interior surface of a vehicle, traveling at the speed his car had allegedly been going when it left Route 7. She worked with Dr. Yolanda Marsh, the attending on duty, who was sharp and didn't ask unnecessary questions. Marsh called for imaging, got the chest x-ray up in under 6 minutes, and said 2 ribs, no pneumothorax, the laceration needs a vascular consult, with the economy of language Lena had always respected in her. "He's stable," Marsh said at the 20-minute mark. "Pressure's holding." "The side wound," Lena said. "I know." Marsh was looking at it. "That's not impact trauma." "No." They didn't say what it was out loud, not with the paramedic still writing up the handoff notes in the corner of the bay. Some conversations required a specific kind of privacy. Marcus came around while they were finishing the secondary assessment. His eyes opened slowly, the left one half swollen from the cut above it, and he turned his head and found Lena in the way a person finds a fixed point when everything else is moving. "Hey," she said. His mouth moved. She leaned closer. His voice was rough and low. "Did they get it?" She understood immediately. "The drive?" A small movement that might have been a nod. "It's with Olwell," she said. "It's already in federal custody." Something in his face shifted. Not relief, not yet, but the specific reduction of tension that comes when the thing you've been protecting is no longer only in your hands. He closed his eyes again. "Mr. Hale?" "Marcus." She kept her voice even. "What happened on Route 7? He didn't answer for a moment, then, "Black SUV. Came up behind me on the curve near Alderton Road. Didn't try to stop me, tried to go through me." A pause. "I got the car off the road before they could finish it." "Did you see plates?" "No plates." His voice was getting quieter. "There wouldn't be." Marsh touched Lena's elbow, professionally, the way colleagues signal without signaling, time to let him rest. Lena stepped back, peeled off her outer gloves, and went to find the 2 men in suits. They were still in the waiting room, which meant they'd been there for close to 40 minutes, which meant whatever they were here for was patient enough to wait, which told her something. The younger one stood when she came through the door. The older one was already standing, had probably been standing the whole time. "Ms. Carter," the older one said. He had a Nashville field office ID that matched Olwell's office, but a different division. "Agent Trent Duvall. This is Agent Corey Park." "Agent Olwell sent you?" "We're coordinating with her office, yes." Duvall had a voice that had spent a long time being professionally calibrated. "We need to discuss the situation with Mr. Hale. He's in treatment. He was run off the road tonight. We know." "Then you know the timeline is no longer 60 hours. Duvall looked at her without adjusting his expression, which was itself a form of adjustment. "We're aware. That's why we're here." He glanced at the waiting room, so half a dozen people scattered across chairs, a man with his arm in a homemade splint, a woman with a toddler who kept trying to eat the corner of a magazine. "Is there somewhere less public?" She took them to the same consultation room Olwell had used. It felt briefly like a recurring motif. Duvall sat. Park stood near the door in a way that was probably habit. Lena sat across from Duvall and waited. "Marcus Hale's documentation is with Agent Olwell," Duvall said. "We've had preliminary eyes on it. It's good. It's more than we expected. He set his hands flat on the table. It also named two individuals we weren't aware of. One is a county official, the other is connected to the hospital system. Lena looked at him. Not this hospital specifically, he said. A hospital system that has a contract with the county. One of Raines's logistics contacts has been using medical supply shipments as secondary cover for some of the contraband. The billing codes are falsified. It's sophisticated, and it's been running for somewhere between 18 months and 2 years. Why are you telling me this? Because you have access to medical billing systems, Duvall said. Drumlin County Regional uses the same billing software as two of the facilities in Raines's network. We're not asking you to access anything you're not authorized to access. We're asking you whether, in your normal course of work, you've noticed anything anomalous. Shipments that didn't match orders, invoices that cleared with unusual speed, suppliers you didn't recognize. Lena thought about this. She thought about it carefully, the way she thought about medication dosages. Not quickly, not instinctively, but with methodical attention to what the question was actually asking. Medical supply management isn't my direct responsibility, she said. We know that. But I've worked in the ER for 3 years. I know what the standard orders look like. I know which suppliers we use and roughly how long clearance usually takes. And? She looked at the table. There was a scratch in the laminate shaped like an unfinished letter. She had noticed it the first time she was in this room. 6 weeks ago, she said slowly, we had a shipment of hemostatic gauze come through the loading dock on a Saturday. That's irregular. We don't normally receive on Saturdays because there's no receiving supervisor. I asked about it, and the charge nurse at the time said the order had been flagged as urgent and approved by administration. She paused. I forgot about it because we needed the gauze and it was there. Duvall and Park exchanged a look that was quick and professionally contained. Is that shipment documented? Duvall asked. Everything's documented. The system logs it automatically. We're going to need that access log. Through proper channels, we'll get a warrant if necessary, but it would be faster if... Talk to administration, Lena said. I'm not the person who can authorize that, and I'm not going to step outside what I'm authorized to do. She met his eyes. I'll tell you what I observed, what I actually saw in my actual capacity. Anything beyond that, you go through the right doors. Duvall held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once. Fair enough. Park from the door said, Raines knows the drive is gone. We think someone inside the sheriff's office notified him within hours of last night's meeting. Lena absorbed that. So the attempt on Marcus tonight was fast. Too fast for him to have planned it after learning about the meeting, which means he may have already been planning to move against Hale. The meeting just accelerated his timeline. Or, Lena said, someone told him about the meeting specifically, and he moved immediately. The room was quiet. That's the other possibility, Duvall said. She went back to the floor. There was work, and the work didn't pause for federal investigations or the unraveling of things that had apparently been unraveling for months before she walked into a parking lot for coffee. The chest pain in Bay 4 was discharged. A 60-year-old man came in with a suspected stroke and turned out to have a blood sugar of 41, which required immediate intervention and then a long, careful conversation with his daughter about why he hadn't been eating. The man with the home splint from the waiting room finally made it to a room and had a fracture that was clean, but would need an orthopedic referral, which meant Lena had to call up to Ashworth's department and leave a message. Ashworth called back himself, which was unusual. Ms. Carter, he said, the fracture referral can go to Dr. Tomas in ortho. She's on tonight. A pause. I also understand you had visitors this afternoon. Men in suits. She waited. I'm not asking you to explain it, he said, with the specific tone of a man who very much wanted an explanation. I'm asking whether the hospital has any exposure here. Not from me, she said, and not from anything I've done in my capacity as a nurse. She thought about the hemostatic gauze. HR may want to look at certain shipment records from the last 2 months. I'd recommend administration review them voluntarily before they're asked to by someone else. Silence. She could almost hear him processing the specific shape of what she'd just said. I see, he said. I'll raise that with the administrator on duty. I think that would be a good idea. She hung up and stood in the nurse's corridor for a moment. The fluorescent lights hummed above her. Someone had taped a handwritten note to the break room door. If you eat other people's food in the fridge, you are the reason we can't have nice things. Lena read it, found it oddly comforting in its normalcy, and kept moving. Marcus was moved to a room on the second floor just after 6. Lena checked on him before the end of her shift, which technically wasn't her floor, and technically wasn't her patient, which she noted and set aside. He was awake, elevated slightly in the bed, with the look of someone who had decided to be functional before his body was fully in agreement. The vascular consult came through, she said, looking at his chart rather than at the monitor, which she was also reading peripherally. The laceration needed 3 deep sutures. You'll have a scar. I have a lot of scars, Marcus said. This one might be longer. Okay. He shifted slightly and then clearly regretted it. The agents, the ones in suits, they talked to you? Yes. What did they want? Same thing Allwell wanted. Information, context. She set the chart down. They know about the supply chain through the hospital network. His expression didn't change dramatically, but something behind his eyes sharpened. I had that in the documentation. I know, they're moving on it. She looked at him directly. Victor knows the drive is gone. They think someone inside the county system tipped him off. Marcus processed this without the reaction she might have expected. No surprise, no alarm. Yeah, he said. I've thought for a while that there was someone, in the sheriff's office or close to it. His voice was steady but tired. I didn't know who, so I didn't put a name in the documentation. I flagged that the timeline of his responses was too fast, too consistent for blind luck. They're aware. Are they moving fast enough? He looked at her. Because the attempt on Route 7, that wasn't a warning. Victor doesn't do warnings twice. That was an attempt. I know. He thought he had more time, Marcus continued. He thought I'd sit on the documentation for another few weeks while things moved through the proper channels. But I didn't. And now he's moving faster than he wanted to, which means he's going to make mistakes. He paused. But it also means the people around him are at risk. The 3 witnesses. One of them is my assistant, Darnell Briggs. He's been helping me catalog the records for 8 months. He doesn't know everything I know, but he knows enough, and Raines's people know he exists. Marcus's jaw tightened. The 60-hour protective status Allwell promised. Has that started? I'll find out, Lena said. She called Allwell from the hallway outside his room. Allwell answered on the second ring. Briggs, Lena said, a beat. We're working on it. That's not the same as done. Carter, I have 2 federal warrants in processing, a county official who just retained an attorney, and a logistics manager who stopped returning calls an hour ago. I'm working on 6 things simultaneously, and Marcus Hale was almost killed tonight, Lena said, by someone who knew where he was and when, which means Darnell Briggs is not safe in whatever location he's currently in, and working on it is not a protection. Silence on the line, then, give me a location for Briggs, if you have it. I don't. Marcus does. I'll send someone to the room. She went back in and told Marcus that Allwell would be sending someone to talk to him about Briggs's location. He nodded. He looked exhausted in the specific way people looked when they had been running on urgency and the urgency had briefly paused. You should sleep, she said. I will. He looked at the window. The sky outside was the deep blue of early evening, just before dark takes over completely. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why are you still here? Your shift ended. He glanced at the clock on the wall. A while ago. Lena thought about that. It was a reasonable question. She had no formal involvement in any of this. She was an ER nurse who had stopped for coffee and stumbled into the edge of an FBI investigation. And at any point since the parking lot she could have handed off her statement, said good luck, and let the people whose actual job this was handle it. I don't know, she said, which was partially true. The fuller truth was more complicated, and she didn't have the language for it right now. Some things you walked into and couldn't walk back out of without leaving something behind. Thank you, Marcus said, for the parking lot, for all of this. She picked up his chart from the bedside table and made a note that wasn't strictly necessary. Get some sleep, she said. Someone will be here in an hour. The parking structure at Drumlin County Regional had 5 levels and was almost entirely empty by 9 at night. Lena's Civic was on level 3, where she always parked, because 3 was the floor where the elevator actually worked. She pushed through the stairwell door and was halfway to her car when she heard the footsteps. They were not trying to be quiet. That was the first thing she registered. Someone not trying to be quiet was either unconcerned or was making a point of the sound. She kept walking. Her keys were already in her hand. Not held as a weapon, just held. Old habit. She took a route that brought her car into visual range earlier and put a concrete pillar at her back. And when she stopped at her driver's door, she turned before she unlocked it. The man who had been following her stopped about 15 feet away. She didn't recognize his face, but she recognized the cut of his jacket. Not a leather cut like Victor's crew wore, but something heavier, the kind of outer layer that could conceal things while making their concealment plausible. He was younger than she expected, mid-20s. He had the posture of someone who had been told to do something and was now having second thoughts about how it was actually going to go. "Ms. Carter," he said. She didn't answer. "I'm not here to hurt you." He held his hands out slightly, away from his sides, an offering of sorts. "I just need to talk." "People who want to talk don't follow other people through parking structures," she said. Her voice was the same temperature it always was. She was already reading the distance between them, the angle of the nearest pillar, the elevator bank to her left. "I know. I'm sorry." He actually sounded it. "My name is Tyler Briggs. Darnell is my older brother." She looked at him. "I know about the agents," he said. "I know about the documentation. Darnell told me what was happening. He shouldn't have, I know, but we're close, and he was scared and he called me 2 days ago." He lowered his hands. "He's not at home. He's been at my place across the county line since yesterday because someone drove past his apartment twice in the same evening and he got a bad feeling. He didn't know who to call that wasn't already connected to the case." "Call Agent Olwell," Lena said. "Right now. Tonight." "He won't. He doesn't trust. He had a bad experience with law enforcement a few years ago. It wasn't his fault. It was a case of wrong place, wrong time, but it left a mark." Tyler ran a hand over the back of his neck. The gesture was so ordinary, so genuinely nervous, that it pushed his story from possible into probable. "Darnell will listen to you. Marcus told him about you. The parking lot." Something crossed his face, not quite a smile. "He said if you were involved, you could be trusted." Lena looked at him for a long moment. She was running the same assessment she always ran. What's real? What's being performed? Where's the pressure? The parking structure was still and quiet. The elevator on her left dinged and opened, and a man in scrubs got out and walked toward the far stairwell without looking at either of them. And nothing happened, and the space stayed what it was. "Tell Darnell that Agent Diane Olwell with the Nashville FBI field office needs his location tonight," she said. "Not tomorrow. Tonight. Give him her direct number." She pulled out her phone, found Olwell's contact, and read the number aloud. "Tell him I said the 60 hours started when Marcus landed in the ER. The clock is running." Tyler repeated the number back to her, which meant he was actually going to use it. He looked at her with the expression of someone who had expected this to go differently. "That's it? What else did you want?" I don't know." He looked at his feet. "I thought you'd have something more. Some kind of plan." "I'm an ER nurse," Lena said. "Olwell has the plan. My job is to make sure the people who need to be in the room are in the room." She unlocked her car. "Tell your brother to call tonight." She got in, started the engine, and pulled out of the space. In her rearview mirror, Tyler Briggs was standing in the fluorescent light of the parking structure with his phone already out. She watched him until the ramp curve took him out of sight. The next morning arrived with the particular unpleasantness of a phone that rang at 5:47 when her alarm was set for 6:30. "Olwell." "We have a problem," Olwell said, no preamble. Lena sat up. "Briggs?" "Briggs called. He's fine. He's in the process of being relocated as of an hour ago. The problem is the county official named in Marcus's documentation." A pause with something complicated in it. "He got ahead of us. He called a press conference for 9 this morning." Lena was quiet for a moment. "To do what?" "To announce that he's been conducting an independent inquiry into allegations of misconduct within the county sheriff's office, and that he has turned his findings over to the state attorney general's office." Olwell's voice was carefully controlled. "He's trying to position himself as a whistleblower. He's in Marcus's documentation. I know. But if he gets in front of this publicly, if he creates a narrative where he's the one who exposed the corruption, then the story gets complicated. His attorneys are already talking about cooperation agreements." Another pause. "The press conference is at 9. I need Marcus Hale's statement on record before 9. I need him to formally certify the documentation this morning. He's in a hospital bed. I know where he is. He has 2 broken ribs and a vascular laceration. Carter. Olwell's voice dropped a register. I know. I also know that if Alderman Westbrook gets to stand at a podium in 3 hours and tell a version of this story where he's the good guy, it creates legal complexity that will take months to untangle. Months during which Victor Reigns' legal team will file everything they can file, and the witnesses will be exposed for longer, and the whole thing gets harder. Lena looked at the ceiling of her apartment. The light outside the window was still gray. Somewhere nearby, a bird was doing something persistent and cheerful that she could not share. I'll talk to Marcus, she said. I'm not promising anything. It's his decision. That's all I'm asking. She got dressed and drove to the hospital before her shift. Marcus was awake when she got to his room. He looked like he'd barely slept, which matched the monitors. She told him about Westbrook and the press conference. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, looking at the window where the morning light was just starting to come in gray and thin. Westbrook, he said. I should have known he'd move this fast. Did you know him? I knew of him. I didn't know he was on Reigns' payroll until I found the payment records, and even then I wasn't certain. The payments were indirect, laundered through a contractor. He looked at her. If he gets to tell his version first, I know. I need a phone. Lena hesitated for 1 second. The second where she weighed his stability, his vitals from the overnight report, the responsible medical position. Then she pulled out her own phone and handed it to him. Olwell's number is in there, he called. She stepped out into the hallway and stood by the window at the end of the corridor, looking out at the parking structure and the tree line beyond it and the pale early sky. She stayed there while Marcus talked to Olwell, and while a night shift orderly mopped the corridor floor around her feet, and while the hospital began its morning routines. She was still there when Marcus's door opened, and a nurse she recognized from the second-floor rotation came out looking slightly flustered and said, Are you Dr. No, sorry. Are you the nurse who's been with Mr. Hale? Yes. He's asking for you. She went back in. Marcus was holding her phone out to her. Olwell needs someone to witness the formal statement, he said. She's sending Park. He'll be here in 40 minutes. He paused. She also said Westbrook's people have been calling the hospital administrator's office, trying to get information on who's been visiting me. Lena looked at him. What kind of information? Names. His jaw was tight. Your name specifically. The morning light had made it fully to the window now. In the parking structure across the way, she could see the first cars of the early shift arriving, small and ordinary and unhurried, and she stood in the room and understood that something she had thought was on the edges of her life had moved. At some point she couldn't precisely identify, much closer to the center. Westbrook knows my name, she said. He knows you were at the diner. The deputies report. Haverford's name is on it, and Haverford talks. Marcus watched her face. I'm sorry. That's my fault. You came in to get coffee. Stop, she said. I mean it. Marcus. She kept her voice level. Stop. This is not your fault. She thought for a moment. If Westbrook is pulling names from police reports to find out who's connected to you, he's building a picture of what Olwell has, which means someone is still feeding him information. Marcus looked at her. Someone inside the process, she said. Still, even after last night. They were both quiet. The monitor above his bed beeped its steady rhythm. Then Park coming here this morning, Marcus said slowly, and Westbrook's people calling administration for names, those two things are happening at the same time. Yes. And whoever is passing information to Westbrook knows Park is coming. The monitor kept beeping. Somewhere in the corridor outside, a cart was being pushed, wheels squeaking irregularly. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary morning. Lena stood in the middle of it and felt the shape of what was moving around them. The documentation, the drive, Westbrook at a podium in 3 hours. A man in a parking structure with his hands held carefully away from his sides. A deputy who had written a report and talked to the wrong person about it. She picked up her phone and called Olwell back. Olwell answered on the first ring. Don't send Park to the hospital, Lena said. Not through the front. A short silence. Why? Because someone who still has access to your process is also talking to Westbrook's people. and Westbrook's people are already asking administration for names. If Park walks through the front entrance of this hospital in 40 minutes, whoever is watching will know exactly where Marcus's statement is happening and when. She looked at Marcus. If the statement doesn't get certified before 9, Westbrook sets the narrative. But if Park walks in the front door, the statement might not get to mean anything. Allwell was quiet for 3 seconds, which was a long time for her. I'll reroute. Service entrance. I'll need someone inside to meet him. I'll be there, Lena said. She hung up. Marcus was watching her with an expression she couldn't fully read. Something between exhaustion and something else. Something that had to do with the specific way a person looks at another person when they have watched them make a series of decisions and are only now beginning to understand what kind of person that is. You do this like you've done it before, he said. I've done a version of it before, she said. He started to say something else, and then his monitor shifted. Not an alarm, but a change in pattern that her eye caught before her conscious mind processed it. She was already at the bedside, already looking at the numbers, when the door opened and the second-floor nurse came back in, and behind the nurse was a man Lena didn't recognize, in hospital administrator's clothing, with a visitor's badge that was real, but whose face she had never seen in this building in 3 years of working here. Excuse me, the man said, to the room in general, in the pleasant voice of someone who expected access. I'm from the administrator's office. I just need to verify some patient information for our records. Marcus looked at Lena. Lena looked at the man. His badge was real. His suit was right. His shoes were wrong. Not medical building wrong, but the specific wrong of someone who had dressed for a role without knowing the smallest details that made it convincing. And his eyes, when they moved from her to Marcus's bedside monitor and then to the phone on the bedside table, moved in a sequence that wasn't curious. It was checking. Patient information gets verified through the nursing station, Lena said. Her voice was the same temperature it always was. Not in the room. The man smiled. It was a practice smile. I understand, but in this case, through the nursing station, she said again. I can walk you there right now if you need help finding it. She moved to stand between him and the bed. Not aggressively, just moved. Placed herself. The room was suddenly a different size. The man's smile held for a moment. Then he said, Of course. Thank you. And turned and walked back out through the door. Lena watched him go. She looked at the door after it closed. Call the desk, she told the second-floor nurse, who was standing near the wall with the expression of someone who had not expected their morning to include this. Tell them to find out where that man went and who authorized his visit. The nurse left. Marcus said quietly, That was Westbrook's. Probably. She was already at the window looking at the parking structure. She could see the service entrance from this angle if she pressed close to the glass. She needed Park in this building before that man had time to make a phone call. She dialed Allwell again. Move Park up, she said. Right now. How far out is he? 20 minutes, maybe. Tell him 15. Tell him to move. Carter, what? Someone just tried to access Marcus's room under a false pretense. Administrator's clothes, real badge, wrong everything else. He's going to make a call in the next 5 minutes, and whoever receives it is going to do the math on how much time they have left before Park gets here, and the statement is on record. She could hear Allwell processing rapidly on the other end. I'm calling Park now. Good. She hung up. She looked at Marcus. He was pale and clearly in pain, and also completely alert, the way people got alert when the circumstances demanded it regardless of their physical state. 15 minutes, she said. Okay. He looked at her. And then? And then the statement is on record before 9. And Westbrook stands at his podium and tells his version of the story, and it goes up against certified federal documentation signed by the man who collected it, and that's not a fair fight. She looked at the door. After that, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Not the same one from the first night, different prefix. She looked at it for a moment. She answered. The voice on the other end was not one she had ever heard before, and it was not asking a question. It was making a statement, and the statement was delivered with the specific quiet of someone who considered themselves unhurried. You should have stayed at the counter and eaten your pie, the voice said. This is the last time someone tells you that nicely. Victor Raines hung up. Lena held the phone against her ear for 3 seconds after the line went dead, listening to the silence the way she had learned to listen to silences. Not as emptiness, but as information. Victor Raines had her number. Victor Raines had called her personally, not through intermediaries, not through a man in a parking structure with nervous hands. Personally. Which meant he had decided she was worth his direct attention, and that was a different category of problem than everything that had come before it. She set the phone face down on Marcus's bedside table and looked at him. "Rains," she said. Marcus's expression didn't change much, but the color in his face went a shade worse. "He called you." "He called me?" She picked the phone back up and called Olwell. When Olwell answered, she said, "Rains just contacted me directly. Personal call. Unknown number. I'll send you the digits. He knows where I am and he knows enough to call me rather than go through anyone else." She paused. "Which means the person inside your process has been more specific than just passing locations. They've been passing names and contact information." Olwell was quiet for 2 seconds. "I'm pulling Park's route now. He's 13 minutes out." "Does anyone in your office know which route he's taking?" Another silence, this one heavier. "2 people." "Then the route needs to change." "Carter, the route needs to change," she said again. "I know what I'm asking. Do it anyway." She heard Olwell exhale. Then away from the phone, 2 short sentences to someone in the room with her. Then back. "Route's changing, 12 minutes, maybe 14. "Okay." Lena looked at Marcus. "One more thing. The man who came in here dressed as hospital administration. Has anyone found him yet?" "I'm checking." "If he's still in the building, he needs to be detained. Not asked to leave, detained." She felt the distinction mattered. "He came here to confirm something. If he leaves with that confirmation, Rains knows exactly how much time he has." "Understood." She hung up and turned to the second-floor nurse, who had returned to the doorway looking like she was reconsidering her career choices. "Did the desk find him?" "He went to the elevator," the nurse said. "They think he went down to the ground floor." "Think or no?" "The elevator went to the ground floor. They lost visual." Lena crossed the room. "I need you to call security right now and tell them there's an unauthorized visitor on premises who is attempting to access a patient's protected information. Give them his description. Don't let him leave the building if they can find him." She was already at the door. "Stay with Mr. Hale. Don't let anyone in this room without a hospital ID you personally recognize." Yes," the nurse said, with the tone of someone committing to something they weren't sure they were qualified for. "You're doing fine," Lena said, and went into the corridor. "Watch him." The ground floor of Drumlin County Regional at 7 in the morning had a specific rhythm. The cafeteria opening, the first visiting hours, the overnight staff handing off to the day shift in clusters of 2 and 3 outside the elevator banks. Lena came off the stairs at a pace that wasn't running but covered ground, scanning as she moved. The man had been in his 40s, medium build, the suit was charcoal, shoes were black leather with a slight square toe that was the specific detail she had clocked, and that she used now to filter the 30-some people moving through the lobby. She didn't see him. She went to the main desk. The security guard on the desk was a man named Henry, who had been in that chair for 11 years and had the particular stillness of someone who had seen enough that not much moved him anymore. She told him quickly and specifically what she needed. Henry made 2 calls while she watched, and then said, "Service corridor, south wing. The camera shows someone matching that description moving toward the loading dock 8 minutes ago." Loading dock. Service entrance. Park. She ran. The South Wing service corridor was not a place that patients ever saw. It was linoleum and bare pipe and the smell of industrial cleaning products. And it connected the main building to the loading dock through a series of turns that she knew because she had walked them twice during a fire drill 3 years ago, and because she had, at some point, learned to know the layout of wherever she worked. Not as a nurse. Earlier than that. Old habit that had never fully gone quiet. She came around the second turn and stopped. The man in the charcoal suit was standing at the far end of the corridor, near the dock door, with his phone to his ear. He heard her footsteps and turned, and for a moment they looked at each other across 40 feet of institutional corridor. He ended his call. He put the phone in his pocket. He looked at her with the expression of someone recalibrating. "You should go back upstairs," he said. "You've already made the call," she said. "I don't know what You went to confirm how much time Rains had before the statement was certified. You confirmed it. You called him." She walked toward him at a measured pace. Not aggressive, not slow. "The question is whether the information you gave him is enough to change anything, or whether it's already too late for it to matter." The man's jaw worked. He was making a calculation. She could see it in the way his weight shifted, the way his eyes moved past her to the corridor behind her, then back. "I'm leaving," he said. "You're not," she said. "Hospital security is coming. I'd recommend you be standing here when they arrive." "You don't have any authority." "No," she agreed. "I'm a nurse. But the FBI does, and they're going to want to talk to you about the specific shape of your morning." She stopped 6 feet from him. "The documentation is already in federal custody. The statement is going to be certified in the next 12 minutes, regardless of what Raines does with what you just told him. All that's left is the question of what your role in this looks like on paper." He looked at her. He had the eyes of a man who had been making bad decisions long enough that he had learned to mistake momentum for commitment. She had seen that look before, too. "You have one option," she said. "Wait here." Behind her she heard footsteps. 2 sets, Henry and someone else. The man in the charcoal suit heard them too. He looked past her, and whatever he saw in the approaching security took the last of the calculation out of his face and left something simpler behind. He waited. Agent Corey Park came through the service entrance at 7:22, escorted by a man Lena didn't recognize who had the compact watchfulness of someone whose job was to stand between things and other things. Park had a briefcase and the look of someone who had rerouted twice and was professionally declining to be bothered by it. "Carter," he said when he saw her. No preamble. "Second floor, room 214, she said. The man in security's office down the hall tried to access Marcus's room under false pretenses. He made a call before we stopped him. Raines may know you're here." Park absorbed this in the way agents absorb things, quickly, with visible adjustment. "How long ago was the call?" 20 minutes, give or take." "Okay." He looked at the briefcase. "I need 10 minutes with Hale and a notary." "The notary is with me." He indicated the man who had come in with him. "Then let's move." They went up the stairs, not the elevator, which Lena chose on instinct and Park didn't question. On the second floor, the nurse was outside Marcus's door with the look of someone who had successfully held a position they hadn't expected to hold. She saw Lena and visibly exhaled. Marcus was sitting up in his bed. He was clearly in pain and clearly ignoring it, which was its own kind of information about what he was made of. Park introduced himself, set the briefcase on the overbed table, and opened it. The notary produced materials from a separate bag. Lena stood near the window and watched the parking structure below. The statement took 9 minutes. Marcus signed twice. The notary stamped and signed. Park closed the briefcase. "Time?" Lena asked. Park checked his watch. 7:34. Westbrook's press conference was at 9. 26 minutes of margin, once transmission was accounted for, to get the certified statement into the hands of the people whose job it was to hold it. "That's enough," Park said, and his voice carried the specific quality of a man who had just moved something from one column to another and was allowing himself to note it. Marcus looked at Lena. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had just set it down in front of other people, which was its own kind of exhaustion. "It's done?" he asked. "It's done," Park said. Lena's actual shift started at 7:45 and she was in the ER by 7:43, which was in no way remarkable given that she had been in the building for 2 hours already. She pulled her badge, clipped it to her scrubs, took the board from the night nurse, and slid back into the work, the way water slides into the space available to it. The ER did not care about press conferences or FBI statements or men in charcoal suits. The ER had a 47-year-old woman with a suspected pulmonary embolism, a child with a laceration above the eyebrow from a cabinet corner, and an overnight admission who had developed a fever that was pushing toward worrying. Lena moved through all three in the first 90 minutes with the focus that the ER demanded and that she gave it, genuinely and completely, because the work required it, and because she was, in whatever complexity her life had accumulated, still first and most reliably a nurse. Dr. Marsh, handing off her overnight at 8:15, looked at Lena over the top of the patient board with an expression that said she had heard things and had opinions about them and was choosing the professional route. "Eventful night?" Marsh said. "The morning has been more interesting," Lena said. "I heard there was a situation on the second floor. Security handled it. I also heard you handled it first." Marsh handed her the board fully. "For what it's worth, I don't know what your background is, and I'm not going to ask. But the people in this department are lucky you're in this department. It was the most direct thing Marsh had ever said to her. Lena accepted it the same way she accepted most things, without excess. Pulmonary embolism in Bay 1, she said. She needs a CT angio, the order's in. Marsh nodded and went. Westbrook's press conference happened at 9:04, which Lena knew because Gerald, who was technically off shift but was in the break room eating a breakfast sandwich, had it pulled up on his phone and narrated it through the break room door to no one in particular. "He's doing the thing," Gerald called. "The thing where someone stands very straight and talks about integrity." Lena poured coffee and didn't respond. "Now he's naming names." "Oh." A pause. "Oh, that's interesting." "Gerald. He's throwing Rains under the bus, like completely. Like he's saying Rains ran the whole operation and Westbrook's office identified it and reported it." Another pause. "He looks very confident for a man whose name is on a certified federal document." "He doesn't know the document is certified," Lena said. "He thinks he has until the FBI processes the original disclosure. He doesn't know the statement went through this morning." Gerald appeared in the break room doorway, holding his phone. "How do you know all of this?" "I was there when the statement was signed." Gerald looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at his phone, then back at her. "You're having a very unusual week," he said. "It started Monday." She drank her coffee. It was hospital coffee, which meant it was functional but not good. And she drank it anyway because her body needed the caffeine and her standards for things being good had been recalibrated by recent events. She had 2 more hours before she could reasonably expect to hear anything from Allwell, and she had a full ER between now and then, and that was fine. That was what she did. She was back in Bay 1 checking on the pulmonary embolism patient when her phone buzzed. Allwell. She stepped out of the bay and answered. "Westbrook's attorneys called us at 9:17, Allwell said. "They got a look at the certified statement through channels I'm not going to explain, and the cooperation offer came about 20 seconds later. Fast. Very. He'd been holding that press conference in reserve for weeks. He thought it was his insurance policy. Get in front of the story, become the face of exposing Rains, and the documentation about his own involvement becomes the complaint of a discredited man." A pause. "He didn't know about this morning." "What happens now?" "His cooperation has conditions. His attorneys are negotiating. Rains doesn't know yet that his primary political cover just offered to testify against him in exchange for reduced charges." Allwell's voice had a specific quality in it, controlled, but something underneath that was the professional version of satisfaction. "When Rains finds out, he's going to move. He has assets he'll try to liquidate, and people he'll try to silence before the warrants come through." "How long do you have before the warrants?" 48 hours if everything goes smoothly. Less if Westbrook's cooperation yields what we think it will." Lena looked at the corridor. An orderly was pushing a cart toward the supply room. A doctor she recognized from cardiology was walking fast toward the elevator. All of it ordinary. All of it the same building she had worked in for 3 years. "Darnell Briggs," she said, "the other 2 witnesses. All 3 are relocated and have federal protective status as of 6 this morning. Tyler Briggs called your number through, which helped." Another pause. "You made that happen." "Tyler made that happen. I just gave him a number." "Carter." Allwell's voice shifted slightly. Not softer, but more direct. "You've been 3 steps ahead of my process since yesterday morning. I'm not going to pretend that's coincidental or that it doesn't come from somewhere specific." A beat. "I looked further into your service record, further than I could get on my own." Lena was quiet. "I'm not going to ask you about it," Allwell said, "but I want you to know that I know, and that it means something, what you did in that parking lot and what you've done since. It means a specific and significant thing." "Do you have everything you need from me?" Lena asked. A pause. "For now, yes." "Then I need to go back to my patients." She looked at Bay 1. "Call me when the warrants move." She hung up and went back into the bay. The call came at 2:41 in the afternoon, during a 20-minute lull between cases that she had used to write up 3 overdue chart notes and eat half a granola bar she had found in her locker. Not Allwell. Duvall, the older agent. "Rains moved," Duvall said, "an hour ago. He liquidated a vehicle holding facility in the county, burned it, we think, to destroy evidence. He's also not at any of his registered addresses. He's running. He's moving. There's a difference, and he knows it. Running puts you on the wrong side of a news cycle. Moving means you're managing assets." A pause. We also picked up communication suggesting he's trying to reach someone inside the hospital, not Hale. Someone in administration. Lena processed this. The medical supply billing records. That's our read. If he can get those records altered or deleted before we pull them with a warrant, the paper trail through the hospital network becomes much harder to establish. The warrant. 48 hours, like I said. But if those records are compromised before... Who in administration? She asked. We don't know. We have a communication, but not a recipient. It went through an intermediary. Lena looked at the granola bar on the desk. She thought about Ashworth telling her to talk to HR. She thought about the Saturday shipment of hemostatic gauze. She thought about the specific way Ashworth had said, "I'll raise that with the administrator on duty." The word that applied to a suggestion she had phrased carefully to be understood by someone paying attention. The hospital administrator received a recommendation this morning to voluntarily review certain shipment records from the last 2 months, she said, before they were asked to by someone else. Duval was quiet for a moment. Who made that recommendation? It was passed through a department head, not to me. The recommendation went upward. She paused. If the administrator acted on it and pulled those records for internal review, they would currently be in the administrator's office, not in the system. Physical copies or a local drive taken out of the live database for review. Which means if Raines's contact inside tries to access the database to alter or delete, the records they're looking for aren't there anymore, Lena said. They're sitting on someone's desk waiting to be reviewed. Another silence. This one had a different texture. Carter, did you... I made a suggestion to a department head about what administration might want to look at proactively. That's all I did. She paused. I suggest you call the hospital administrator directly and tell them not to put those records back into the system until you have your warrant in hand. I'm calling right now, Duval said. She could already hear him moving. Stay available. She ate the rest of the granola bar. By 4 in the afternoon, the ER had filled back up in the way it always did in the late afternoon. The people who had waited all day to see if they felt better, and had concluded, reluctantly, that they did not. Lena worked with the efficient autopilot of someone who had done this job long enough that the mechanics of it ran parallel to the active part of her brain, which was tracking 3 separate threads simultaneously. Thread 1. The warrant. Duval had said 48 hours, but events were compressing timelines. Raines was moving. Moving men who were trying to manage their exposure made mistakes, and mistakes created their own openings, but they also created their own dangers. Thread 2. Marcus. She had checked in at noon. He was stable, irritable, in the way of a person who heals well but hates being stationary, and had eaten something the dietary department described as lunch. His ribs would need 6 to 8 weeks. The vascular sutures were holding. He would be discharged in 2 or 3 days if he stayed stable, and the question of where he went after that was not a small one. Thread 3. The thing Raines had said on the phone. You should have stayed at the counter and eaten your pie, said with the quiet of someone who was not yet afraid, and who wanted her to know he was not yet afraid. That was information, not about his emotional state, about his assessment of the situation. He had called her personally to deliver that message, which meant he wanted her to feel it, which meant he had calculated that making her feel it would change something about how she moved through the next 24 hours. He was wrong about that. But the fact that he had tried told her something about what he was used to. He was used to that working. She was thinking about this in the medication room at 4:30 when Dr. Ashworth appeared in the doorway with the look of a man who had been managing a thing all day and had arrived at the part where he needed to say it out loud. The administrator pulled those records this morning, he said, based on a conversation I had with her at 7:45. He looked at Lena steadily. An agent named Duval called her at 2:50 and told her to hold them pending a warrant. Good, Lena said. The contact who was trying to access those records, someone from outside the hospital, attempted to reach her through a board member. The board member passed the message without knowing what it was. His jaw was tight. We've been used. The hospital was used, not by you. She looked at him. The records are intact? They're locked in her office. Then the hospital did the right thing. Ashworth looked at her for a moment with the expression of a man recalibrating something he had carried into the room. HR still wants to talk to you, he said, about the parking lot. I know. I'm going to recommend they close the inquiry, he said, for the record. She nodded. He left. The warrant landed at 6:18 in the evening. Duval called her 3 minutes later, which told her she was on a list of people who got calls when things moved, which was a different relationship to this situation than the one she had started with. The warrant covers the hospital billing records, 4 supply chain companies, and 2 logistics managers, Duval said. We're executing tonight. A pause. We also have a location on Rains. On Rains, he's not running. He's at a property he owns under a third party's name, 40 minutes north of the county line. Are you moving on him tonight? In the morning, early. We want the billing records in hand first, corroboration before the arrest. He paused. I wanted you to know. She was in the parking structure, sitting in her car, about to drive home. The engine was off. The parking structure had that particular quiet it had at the end of the day when the day shift cars had mostly gone and the night shift hadn't fully filled in yet. Okay, she said. There's one more thing. His voice changed slightly. Not less professional, but differently weighted. The phone call Rains made to you this morning. We were able to use the number to backtrack to a burner purchased at a gas station 40 miles from here. A pause. He used it once, for that call. He used it to reach you specifically. Another pause. We've been trying to understand why. He wanted me to be cautious, Lena said. He thought if I was cautious, I'd pull back, stop moving in the spaces around his operation. Did it work? Obviously not. Duval made a sound that was not quite a laugh. No, it didn't. He cleared his throat. There's another possibility. One of my colleagues raised it. What? He called you instead of Hale, Duval said. Hale is the direct threat. Hale has the documentation. If he wanted to intimidate someone into inaction, the logical target is Marcus Hale. But he already tried to kill Hale. He moved on that front, so he called you. A pause. Which means he's been watching who's been moving around Hale's situation, and he identified you as the connective tissue, the person who keeps the other pieces in place. Lena looked at the windshield. The concrete pillar in front of her car had a crack in it that ran diagonally and then stopped, arrested mid-motion. He's not trying to intimidate me, she said slowly. He's trying to figure out who I am. The call was reconnaissance. That's what my colleague thinks. And if he's been trying to figure out who I am, he may have found out more than we're comfortable with, Duval said. We flagged your address as a precaution. We have a unit doing periodic drive-bys tonight. She processed this without the spike of fear that would have been the natural response, because the natural response and the useful response were not always the same thing. I'm not going home tonight, she said. It was a decision, not a complaint. We were going to suggest that. I know somewhere I can be? She started the engine. Call me when the warrant execution is done. In the morning, early. I'll be awake. She pulled out of the parking structure into the evening and drove not toward her apartment but away from it, on roads she knew well, through a county that was smaller than it felt, toward the thing that was moving toward its end, whether she was ready for it or not. She spent the night in the break room of the Hollow Creek Diner. Dolores had offered it without being asked more than once, setting up a folding cot in the back room next to the walk-in cooler and providing a pillow that had seen better decades and a blanket that was clean and sufficient. Lena lay on the cot in the dark with her phone on her chest and the hum of the cooler for company and slept in the way she had learned to sleep in conditions that required it. Not well, but enough. At 4:47 in the morning, her phone lit up. Duval. Warrant executed. Record secured. Moving on Rains at EO 600. She sat up. The cot complained. She put her feet on the floor and sat in the dark for a moment, listening to the cooler and the early silence outside, and the particular quality of a morning that had not yet decided what it was going to be. At 5:15, Dolores knocked and said she had coffee on and eggs if Lena wanted them. Lena said yes to both. She was sitting at the counter with her coffee and eggs when the diner's front window lit up with passing headlights. Multiple vehicles, moving north on the county road at a pace that was purposeful. No sirens, no lights, just the specific convoy of vehicles that meant something was being coordinated and didn't want to announce itself. Dolores watched them pass. That's a lot of cars for this time of morning, she said. Yes, Lena said. She drank her coffee. At 6:03, Duval called. She answered. She heard background noise, the kind of layered radio noise and controlled shouting that meant people in motion and events in progress. She waited. Carter. His voice was different. Not bad different, but different in the way voices were different when something had just inverted. What happened? She said. Rains wasn't at the property. She set down her coffee cup. The property was there. The vehicles were there. 3 of his people were there. They're in custody. But Rains himself? A pause. And she could hear something in that pause that was frustration and something else that she couldn't name yet. The property has a secondary structure we didn't have on the site map. A barn, basically, with vehicle access to a road that isn't on county records. He went out the back. How long ago? Best estimate, 2 to 4 hours. Before we executed. 2 to 4 hours. Before the warrant execution, which meant someone had told him. Someone told him, she said. That's what it looks like. She was quiet. She looked at the window. The headlights were gone. The county road was empty and gray in the early morning, and somewhere out there, 40 minutes north or farther now, Victor Rains was in a vehicle on an unmarked road with 2 to 4 hours of distance already on the people coming for him. Where does that road go? She asked. We're mapping it now. It connects to State Route 9 about 3 miles out. From there, he stopped. From there he has options, she said. Yes. She looked at her eggs. She thought about the shape of the thing. The documentation certified. The billing records secured. Westbrook cooperating. 3 witnesses protected. All the pieces that had been assembled carefully, painstakingly, over 4 years of Marcus Hale's deliberate record-keeping and 8 months of Darnell Briggs's steady help. All of it intact. And the man at the center of it, the man whose operation it was, in a vehicle on a state highway at 6 in the morning with a head start. He knows we have everything, she said. He's not going to run far. Running far means abandoning everything. He's going to go somewhere he thinks is safe. Someone he thinks is protected. We're thinking the same thing. Then you know who, she said. The people he still trusts. The ones not in the documentation because they're too close to him to have left a paper trail. Who's left? Duval was quiet. Then, there's a name we haven't been able to put in any of the official channels. Someone at the county hospital system level. Not Drumlin County Regional, the central administrative office. She's been there for 11 years. Lena went still. Her name is Sandra Polk, Duval said. She processed the medical supply billing contracts. She's also, and we only found this 3 hours ago, she's Victor Rains' sister-in-law, his deceased wife's older sister. The break room of the Hollow Creek Diner was completely quiet except for the cooler hum. She's in the county hospital administration building, Lena said. Her office is there, yes. She starts at 7:30. And if Rains is going somewhere he thinks is safe, he might be going to her, Duval said, or she might already be helping him move. We don't have enough for a warrant on her yet. It came in too late, and the connection alone isn't enough without the billing record cross-reference, which our analysts are working on right now. Lena looked at the clock above the diner counter. 6:11. Sandra Polk's office started at 7:30. The county hospital administration building was a 20-minute drive from where she was sitting. How long for the billing record cross-reference? She asked. Our analyst says 45 minutes if everything is where we think it is. 45 minutes put them at 6:56 on the outside. Polk's office opened at 7:30. 34 minutes between having what they needed and the moment when Rains might already be inside that building. Carter, Duval said, I need to be very clear. You are a civilian. You are a nurse. What happens in the next hour is federal law enforcement territory, and you should... I know, she said. I mean it. I know what you mean. She put money on the counter for the eggs and the coffee. I'm asking you one question, and then I'm getting in my car. The administration building. Does it have a public access pharmacy clinic on the ground floor? A pause. Yes, I believe so. It's a county-run clinic. Then I'm going there as a medical professional to check in with a colleague about a patient referral, she said. That's all. I'm going to be in a public building, in a professional capacity, during normal operating hours. She picked up her keys. But if I happen to be in that building when things develop, I'll know the layout. Carter. Drive time is 20 minutes, she said. Call me when you have the billing cross-reference. She walked out of the diner into the early morning and got in her car and drove north on the county road with the windows down and the cold air coming in and the sky ahead of her just beginning to separate from the dark, gray at the edges, the specific gray of a morning that hadn't committed to anything yet. Her phone lit up on the passenger seat at 6:38. Not Duval, not Olwell. A text from an unknown number. 3 words. I see your car. She didn't brake. That was the first thing. The instinct to brake, to slow, to look around for the source of the message. And she overrode it because braking told whoever was watching that the text had landed. She kept her speed exactly where it was and used her mirrors instead of her eyes, scanning without turning her head. The county road at 6:38 in the morning had 2 vehicles behind her. One was a pickup truck with a cracked headlight that had been behind her since she left the diner. The other was farther back, dark-colored, maintaining distance with the specific consistency of something that was trying to maintain distance. She called Duval. He answered in one ring. I was about to call you. Someone's behind me, she said. Unknown number, text, 3 words. I see your car. She kept her voice even. Dark vehicle, maybe a quarter-mile back, been there since I left the diner. Pull over. No. Carter? If I pull over, I'm stationary and alone on a county road at 6:40 in the morning. I'm better moving. She checked the mirror again. The dark vehicle was still there, still the same distance. Is Raines connected to anyone between the diner and the administration building? She heard Duval pull up something, keys clicking. There's a property about 8 miles up Route 9 that we flagged as a secondary address for one of his logistics contacts. Nothing on the county road itself. Okay, she thought fast. I'm going to the hospital, Drumlin County Regional, not the administration building. I'm going to a place I know, with security, with people, and I need you to have someone meet me there. I can have Park there in 12 minutes. I'll be there in 9. She paused. And Duval? The text came from an unknown number, different from the one Raines used yesterday. He's cycling through burners. Which means he's close enough to have eyes on you personally, or he has someone else doing it. Yes. She watched the mirror. The dark vehicle had moved closer. Not dramatically. Enough. Someone who knew I was at the diner. Someone who's been on you since last night, Duval said, and the way he said it was not comfortable. I'm calling Park now. Stay on the road. Stay moving. Call me when you're at the hospital. She drove the 9 minutes with both hands on the wheel and her eyes moving between the road and the mirror with the regular rhythm of someone who had done this before, in different circumstances, in different vehicles, on roads considerably less friendly than a Tennessee County 2-lane in early morning. The dark vehicle stayed with her through 2 turns and then, half a mile from the hospital, fell back. Dropped speed. Turned off at an intersection she didn't take. She didn't know if that was Raines calling them off or Raines deciding the hospital wasn't the right location for whatever came next. Both possibilities were uncomfortable in different ways. She pulled into the hospital lot at 6:49 and sat in the car with the engine running for 30 seconds before she got out. Park arrived at 7:02. He came in a car she didn't recognize, civilian plates, and he looked like he had not slept. He probably hadn't. He found her in the hospital lobby, and they stood near the window that looked out on the lot while he told her what the last hour had produced. Raines had been on Route 9 heading north. A state police unit had visual on a vehicle matching the description at 6:20 and had been tracking at distance. At 6:31, the vehicle had pulled into a gas station outside a town called Mill Haven, and the driver had gone inside. When the unit moved to close, the vehicle was empty. The driver, who might or might not have been Raines, had gone out a side exit. He switched vehicles, Lena said. That's what we think. The gas station has cameras. We're pulling them. Which means he planned this. The gas station stop was the switch point. He had a second vehicle there. Yes. Park rubbed the side of his jaw. The text to you. That was him telling you he'd been watching you. Not a threat. Information. He wanted you to know he'd been 3 steps behind this whole time. Or 3 steps ahead, she said, depending on how you look at it. Park looked at her. How do you look at it? She thought about the geometry of it. Raines moving north on Route 9, switching vehicles. The administration building 20 minutes south. He's not going to his sister-in-law, she said. That's what he wants us to think. He leaked that connection deliberately, or he knew we'd find it and decided to use it. He couldn't know we'd find the connection in one night. He's been doing this for years. He knows how investigations work. He knows that if you pull enough documents fast enough, the family connection shows up. She looked at the parking lot. The morning was fully light now, pale and flat. Sandra Polk is not where he's going. Sandra Polk is where he wants your people to be. Park was quiet for a moment. Then where is he going? Where's the thing that still matters to him? She turned to look at Park directly. Not the billing records. We have those. Not Westbrook. He's already cooperating. The documentation is certified. The witnesses are protected. Everything that can be used against him is already in federal custody. She paused. Except one thing. Park's jaw tightened. The contraband itself, she said. The physical inventory. Wherever he's been storing it, it's the one thing that hasn't been touched by warrants yet, because the billing records only give you the paper trail. You need the physical evidence to complete the picture. We have a location, Park said slowly. Or we had one. A warehouse in the industrial section of Mill Haven. It's in the documentation. But you haven't executed a warrant on it. It was on the list for tomorrow, after the arrest. No arrest, she said. And now he's in Mill Haven. Park had his phone out before she finished the sentence. She was not supposed to go to Mill Haven. That was made clear to her by both Park and Duvall when the calls were made, the routes were mapped, and the tactical picture was restructured around a warehouse in an industrial section of a small town 30 miles north. She was a civilian. She was a nurse. The appropriate thing was for her to remain at Drumlin County Regional and be available by phone. She understood all of this. She also understood that she had been on the edge of this situation since the parking lot at the Hollow Creek Diner, and that the center of it was moving, and that understanding where things were moving was not the same as moving with them. She drove to Mill Haven. She was not the first car there, and she was not close to where the action was. She parked on a public street 2 blocks from the industrial section and stayed in her car and watched. She could see from that distance the federal vehicles positioned at the warehouse perimeter, 4 of them, 2 on each accessible side, the kind of arrangement that was about containment first and entry second. Her phone buzzed. Duvall. I can see you on traffic cameras 2 blocks east, he said. You're a nurse on a public street. I'm not going to tell you to leave because I don't have jurisdiction over a public street. His voice was dry. But if you could remain in your vehicle, I would appreciate it. I'm in my vehicle, she said. Good. A pause. He's in there. The gas station camera confirmed the vehicle switch. Second vehicle is registered to a shell company that traces back to him. It's at the warehouse. Is he alone? We think 2 others. Armed, probably. We're assessing. She looked at the warehouse from 2 blocks away. It was a flat-roofed building in a row of similar flat-roofed buildings, the kind of anonymous industrial structure that was specifically designed not to attract attention. Chain link on the perimeter, partially obscured by overgrown shrubs that hadn't been cut back in years. What's your entry timeline? She asked. Negotiator is attempting contact first. We'd prefer a clean surrender. Victor Raines is not going to surrender to a negotiator at 7 in the morning, she said. He's going to try to buy time until he figures out if there's a way out. I know that. The negotiator knows that. We're doing it anyway because procedure exists for a reason. A short pause. Carter, why are you actually here? She thought about how to answer that. Because I want to see it, she said. I want to see the moment when it stops. Duvall was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said, which was not what she expected. Then, stay in the vehicle. She stayed in the vehicle. The negotiator made contact at 7:19. She couldn't hear the conversation from 2 blocks away, but she could see the activity at the perimeter, the stillness that meant something was in progress, the specific posture of agents who were waiting rather than moving. It lasted 11 minutes. Then 2 things happened almost simultaneously. A door on the east side of the warehouse opened, and a man came out with his hands raised, and 2 agents moved to meet him. That was one of the 2 others. The surrender of one person, practical and undramatic, the decision of a man who had done the math. And from the north side of the building, a vehicle moved. A side door she hadn't seen from her angle, a truck that had been inside the warehouse, now outside and moving at a speed that was not casual. The federal vehicles repositioned. She could see it from 2 blocks away. The vehicles that had been static suddenly in motion, angles changing, the specific reorganization of a containment that was being stressed. The truck turned north, away from the parked federal vehicles, toward the one road in the industrial section that wasn't blocked. She called Duvall. He didn't answer. He was busy. She looked at the map she had pulled up on her phone. The road the truck was heading toward connected to Route 9 in less than a mile, and Route 9 went north through Mill Haven and then west, and then into a county that was not Drumlin County and not the jurisdiction of the same federal office. She was on that road. Not intentionally. She had parked there because it was a public street 2 blocks from the warehouse, and she had chosen it without thinking about which direction the warehouse's north exit faced. Now the truck was coming toward her and the federal vehicles were repositioning, and there was a question of whether the repositioning would happen fast enough. She started her car. She pulled it forward 20 feet, which put her Civic perpendicular across the road, not blocking it entirely. The road was wide enough that a truck could go around her on the left side if it wanted to, but it made the path not straight, and making the path not straight, even marginally, bought the federal vehicles time. The truck came around the corner. It slowed. Not stopped. Slowed. She could see the driver through the windshield from 30 feet away. Not Rains. One of his people, jaw set, making a calculation. She did not get out of the car. She sat behind the wheel and looked at the driver, and the driver looked at her. Her car was not a meaningful obstacle to a truck. He could go around her or through her, and both were possible, and she knew that, and he knew that, and they both also knew that there were federal vehicles repositioning and the sound of them was audible. The driver went for the left side. He had room, barely, wheels on the curb. He was going to make it. And then Duval's vehicle came around the corner from the north, from the direction the truck was heading, and stopped across the road, and there were 2 more vehicles behind it, and the truck had nowhere to go that wasn't a federal vehicle or a Civic, and it stopped. The driver got out with his hands up. He was 25 years old, maybe younger. He had the face of someone who had been told this was going to be easy. Duval was out of his vehicle, moving toward the truck. He looked at Lena's car across the road. He looked at her through the windshield. He said something she couldn't hear. She read his lips well enough. Move your car. She moved her car. Agents reached the truck. She watched from the curb as they opened the doors and then the cargo area, and she watched Duval's posture change when he saw what was inside. Even from that distance, she could read it, the specific stillness of a person looking at something that confirms what they suspected in a volume that exceeds what they expected. Rains was not in the truck. He had sent his driver and his inventory while he went somewhere else. Her phone rang at 8:04. Unknown number. She knew before she answered. "You moved your car in front of my truck," Rains said. No anger, observational, the way he had been on every call. "That was interesting." "Where are you?" she said. "Somewhere that isn't a warehouse in Mill Haven." A pause. "You cost me a truck and a driver and a significant amount of inventory. I want you to understand that I'm aware of what you've done." "I think you want me to be afraid," she said. "I think that's what all the calls are about." "I want you to understand the scope of the accounting," he said. "That's different from afraid." "What accounting?" she said. "Your inventory is in federal custody. Your documentation is certified. Your political cover is cooperating with the investigation. Your warehouse is being processed." She paused. "You have a truck driver who's 25 years old and made a bad decision. That's what's left." Silence. "You're going to turn yourself in," she said, "or you're going to run, and running makes everything worse, and you know it. The moment the warehouse evidence is fully processed, you have no leverage for any kind of cooperation agreement. The window is closing, and you're standing in it." "You're not an agent," he said. "No." "You're a nurse." "Yes." "Then why," he said slowly, "does the FBI do what you tell them?" It was the first genuine question he had asked her in any of their conversations. Not a threat, not a message. An actual question, from a man who had spent years understanding how people moved and who they listened to, and who had encountered something in the last 4 days that didn't fit his model. "They don't do what I tell them," she said. "I give them information. They make their own decisions." She watched the agents working at the truck, the systematic process of evidence documentation. "The difference between you and me is that I'm not trying to control the outcome. I'm trying to make sure the right information is in the right hands at the right time." "Philosophical," he said. "Practical," she said. A longer silence. She heard background sound, not road noise, not outdoor noise. Indoor. A hum that was familiar but that she couldn't place immediately. "Turn yourself in today," she said. "Not tomorrow. If your attorney calls Olwell before 10 this morning, there's still a cooperation conversation to be had. After that, I know what after that looks like," he said. "Then you know what you need to do." He hung up. She sat on the curb with her phone in her hand and the morning sun finally breaking over the rooftops of the industrial section, throwing long, flat light across the asphalt. Duval walked over. He looked at the phone in her hand. "Rains?" he said. "Just now. Third call." She stood. Her knees were stiff from sitting in the car. "He's indoors somewhere. I could hear a ventilation hum. Not a car, not an open space." Duval looked at her steadily. "You told him to call Allwell before 10. "I told him the window was closing." "Carter." He rubbed his face. He was exhausted and trying not to show it, and not entirely succeeding. "You are the most consistently outside your lane person I have encountered in 14 years of federal work." "I know. I can't decide if I'm grateful or concerned." "Both is probably accurate," she said. He looked at the warehouse where his team was still working. Indoor ventilation hum. "You said it was familiar." She thought about it again, the specific pitch of it. Not HVAC exactly. A different frequency, a steadier tone. She had heard it somewhere before many times in a professional context. "Hospital equipment," she said slowly. "Not a hospital, but the same kind of climate control. Pharmaceutical grade. Temperature-controlled storage." Duval looked at her. "He's in a medical storage facility," she said. "Something connected to the supply chain. Something that looks legitimate from the outside." She thought about the billing records, the supply chain companies named in the documentation. Pull the addresses of the supply chain companies in Marcus's documentation. Not the warehouses, the legitimate business fronts. Storage facilities, distribution centers. Duval was already on his phone. She listened to him relay the request and heard the response come back in 60 seconds. 3 addresses, he said. "One is in Nashville. One is 40 miles south. One is—" He stopped. "What?" 11 miles north of Mill Haven, he said. "A pharmaceutical storage and distribution center." He looked at her. "Registered to a company that appears in Marcus's billing records as a legitimate supplier." 11 miles, 10 minutes from the warehouse. Close enough to go to ground, close enough to still have access to communications, close enough that someone who knew the supply chain would know it existed. "That's where he is," she said. "You can't know that." "No," she agreed. "But you can find out." Duval was already calling it in. She watched him move away with his phone to his ear, and she stood on the curb in the morning sun and thought about the ventilation hum and the specific sound of pharmaceutical climate control, and the fact that a man who had spent years running contraband through medical supply chains would, when he needed to disappear, go somewhere he knew the smell of. The warrant for the pharmaceutical facility took 22 minutes to process because the judge was local and already awake, and because Duval had learned to front-load his documentation. Lena spent those 22 minutes sitting in the hospital cafeteria in Mill Haven. They had sent her to the nearest public building with a coffee machine and a security guard, drinking something that claimed to be dark roast, and watching her phone. At 9:47, Duval called. "He walked out," Duval said. When the agents arrived at the facility, before they were fully in position, he walked out the front door with his hands up. A pause. His attorney was on the phone. Cooperation call with Allwell was in progress when we arrived. She set down the coffee cup. "He timed it," Duval said. "He waited until the cooperation call was active, and then he walked out. He wants it on record that he surrendered during active cooperation, not at gunpoint. He's positioning already." "That's fine," she said. "Is it?" "He's in custody. The cooperation is on record, which means his own statements are going to be used to build the case. His attorney thinks that's his protection. It's actually the mechanism that closes the exits." She paused. "Whatever he tells Allwell in that conversation is going to fill in the pieces the documentation didn't cover." Duval was quiet. Then, "You've done this before, not nursing. This specifically, reading how investigations close, how people position themselves, where the pressure is." "A long time ago," she said. "I believe that." He paused. "Victor Raines is in federal custody. His warehouse contents are in evidence processing. Sandra Polk was brought in for voluntary interview 40 minutes ago, and she hasn't stopped talking since. The 2 witnesses besides Briggs are confirmed safe." He said all of this with the measured pace of a man reading a list he had been building toward for a long time. "It's done." She looked at the cafeteria around her. A nurse in scrubs from the Millhaven facility was eating a muffin at the next table and reading something on her phone with the dedicated blankness of someone maximizing a 15-minute break. An orderly was wiping down the coffee station with the thoroughness of someone who had been asked to do it twice already. Normal things. The ordinary machinery of a medical building doing its ordinary work. "Marcus," she said, "he needs to know. We're calling him now. And the program, his veteran program. The part sourcing is going to be disrupted when the supply chain companies are processed as part of the investigation. He's going to need support to keep it running." A pause. "That's not something I have a direct answer for." "No, but it's something that needs an answer." She stood. "I'll be back in Drumlin County in 40 minutes. Whatever you need from me for the formal statements, I'm available this afternoon." Carter. His voice had a different quality than it had carried in any of their previous conversations. Stripped of the professional containment, briefly, in the way that happened when the thing being contained was finished. "Thank you, for all of it. From the beginning." She picked up the coffee cup and walked it to the bin. "I was just trying to get coffee," she said. She drove back south on Route 9 with the windows down and the morning fully established now, warm and clear, the kind of Tennessee fall morning that was genuinely pleasant if you had time to notice it. She noticed it. She let herself notice it for the length of the drive in a way she hadn't permitted herself in 4 days. Just the road and the light and the smell of dry leaves from the tree line. She was 15 minutes from Drumlin County when her phone rang. Not Duval. Not Olwell. Not Park. Marcus Hale, calling from his hospital room, which meant someone had given him a phone. She answered. "They told me," he said. His voice was rough. Sleep and pain and something underneath both. "They called and told me." "I know." A long pause. "The program." He said, "Duval said you mentioned the program. Supply chain's going to be disrupted. You'll need to source differently for a while." She kept her eyes on the road. "I know someone in military surplus medical logistics who might be able to help bridge the gap. I'll make a call." Silence on his end. She could hear the hospital sounds behind him, the PA system in the distance, the specific ambience of a building full of people being kept alive. "Lena," he said. "Yeah." "Who are you, actually?" She drove. The road curved and the tree line opened briefly to show a wide field and then closed again. She thought about the question and what it was asking and what the true answer was, which was not a simple one and had never been. "I'm the nurse who was on shift today," she said. "Same as yesterday." Marcus was quiet for a moment. She could feel him deciding something. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay." She was 2 miles from the hospital when she saw the black SUV in her rearview mirror, not moving fast, not close, just there, pacing her from a distance. She watched it for 30 seconds. It didn't gain or fall back. Consistent. She called Duval. "Black SUV," she said, behind me, 2 miles from the hospital." "Raines is in custody," Duval said immediately. "His people in custody. The driver from this morning is in processing." "I know who's in custody," she said. "I also know that a network that's been running for years doesn't have only the people in your documentation. It has people who weren't visible enough to make the records." She watched the mirror. "Someone followed me from the diner this morning. This might be the same vehicle, different position. Can you get a plate?" "Working on it." She slowed slightly, let the distance close a fraction. The plate was partial, mud on the bottom edge, but she got 3 letters and a number. She read them to Duval. She heard him relay it immediately. A 40-second pause. "Carter." His voice had changed again. "That vehicle is registered to a name that doesn't appear in our documentation, but it appears in Westbrook's personal financial records, which we received from his attorneys this morning as part of the cooperation disclosure." A pause. "It's registered to a man named Gary Fulton. He's not in Raines's network, he's in Westbrook's." Westbrook. Who was cooperating? Who had turned over his financial records in exchange for consideration? Whose cooperation everyone had assumed made him contained? "Westbrook gave you his financial records this morning," she said. "Yes." "And Fulton's name appears in those records?" "Yes." "Does Westbrook know that Fulton's name would appear when you reviewed the records?" The silence was very brief but very specific. "Duval," she said. Westbrook's cooperation. The financial records he turned over. Were they complete? They were. We're still reviewing. If Westbrook knew Fulton's name was in there, then turning over the records is also telling Fulton that Fulton is now exposed. And if Fulton was Westbrook's own fixer rather than Raines's, then Raines going down doesn't touch Fulton unless those records surface. She watched the SUV in the mirror, still there, still pacing. Westbrook's cooperation might not be him helping you. It might be him managing which names surface and when. Another silence. This one was the longest. "Pull over," Duvall said. "Don't pull over. Listen, I'm sending a unit to your location right now. What's your exact position?" She read off the mile marker she was passing. 3 minutes, he said. "Keep moving. Don't change your speed. Stay on the line." She kept moving. The SUV stayed with her, and she stayed on the line. And she watched the mirror and thought about the shape of things that looked finished but weren't, and about the difference between a case that was closed and a case that was complete, and about the man in the black SUV who had been behind her since morning and who was still there, patient and unhurried, as if he had somewhere to be and was in no rush to get there because he already knew she would arrive at the same destination. The unit came from ahead of her. She saw the lights before she saw the vehicle, a county patrol car coming south on Route 9. And it passed her, and then the lights changed and it was turning and the SUV in her mirror braked hard. The SUV didn't pull over. It turned east onto a county road she hadn't taken, moving fast, and she watched it go and kept driving. And Duvall was saying something in her ear about the patrol car pursuing and another unit cutting east. And she drove the last 2 miles to Drumlin County Regional with both hands on the wheel and arrived in the parking structure on level 3 and sat in her car in the space she always parked in and turned off the engine. The parking structure was quiet. The elevator to her left was working. Somewhere in the building, on the second floor, Marcus Hale was in a hospital bed with broken ribs and a phone that someone had brought him. Somewhere north of the county line, Victor Raines was in a vehicle with his attorney on the phone, cooperating because cooperation was the only door left open. Somewhere in the financial records of a man who had stood at a podium that morning and positioned himself as a reformer, a name had surfaced that connected to a car that had been behind her for 2 hours. She got out of her car. She clipped her badge to her scrubs. She took the elevator to the ground floor because today it was working. At the ER desk, Gerald looked up from the board with the expression of a man who had tracked her location across most of the county through text updates from Park and was now processing that she was standing in front of him in one piece. "You're late," he said. "I know. Ashworth's been in twice asking for you. I'll find him. And there's someone in the waiting room." Gerald tilted his head toward the lobby. "Military, 2 of them. They've been here since 8:30, said they'd wait." She looked toward the waiting room. 2 people in uniform, not dress, working uniform, sitting in the chairs nearest the window. They stood when she looked at them. She did not know their faces, but she knew the branch insignia. She knew the specific way they held themselves. And she knew, with a clarity that arrived the way true things arrived, not gradually, not with preamble, that whatever they were here to tell her was going to change the shape of the next chapter of her life in a way she had not prepared for, had in fact spent 4 years deliberately not preparing for. One of them, a woman, mid-30s, the careful posture of someone delivering something they have rehearsed, took a step toward her and said, "Ms. Carter, I'm Major Tessa Wren, Joint Medical Command. We've been following the events of the last 4 days, and we need to speak with you about your service record." A pause. Specifically, the parts of it that were sealed. Lena looked at Major Wren for a moment without speaking. Not from shock, more from the particular recalibration that happened when something you had been outrunning for 4 years finally stopped being behind you and appeared directly in front of you instead. "How long have you been watching the situation?" she asked. "Since Agent Olwell's office flagged your name 2 days ago," Wren said. "We had a file on you already. We've had one since you separated." She said it without apology, without the softening that would have made it feel worse. Just a fact, stated plainly. The file was flagged for review every 18 months. The last review was 7 months ago. Nothing had changed. A pause. Then 4 days ago, everything changed. The waiting room had 4 other people in it, a woman with a sleeping toddler, an older man with his arm against his side, a teenage boy staring at his phone. None of them were paying attention to Lena and the 2 people in uniform. This was, Lena thought, probably a conversation that deserved something better than a hospital waiting room with institutional chairs and a television in the corner showing a morning program on mute. "There's a consultation room," she said, "down the hall." She took them there. Same room, same scratch in the laminate. She had sat across this table from Allwell, from Duval, and now from Major Tessa Wren, and the man she introduced as Captain Dale Ostrowski, who was Joint Medical Command's legal liaison, and who had the quiet, organized quality of someone who spent his professional life managing paperwork that mattered. Wren put a folder on the table, not thick, maybe 20 pages. She slid it toward Lena. "Your service record," Wren said, "the complete version." Lena looked at it but didn't open it yet. "You spent 11 years in service," Wren said. "The first 4 are ordinary record. The last 7 are classified at a level that required my commanding officer's authorization to access." She paused. 3 combat deployments, 2 in active conflict zones, 1 in an advisory capacity that is still classified and that I'm not going to discuss in this room. She looked at Lena steadily. "During those deployments, you were embedded with units that had no dedicated medical personnel. You performed emergency surgical interventions, triage decisions, and field trauma management under conditions that the medical evaluators who reviewed your record described as, and I'm quoting, outside the scope of what should be survivable by both the patients and the practitioner." Lena said nothing. 23 confirmed saves, Wren continued, in conditions where the standard of care was keep them breathing until extraction. You did considerably more than that. She folded her hands. When you separated, the commanding officer who signed your discharge noted that you were leaving voluntarily, that you were mentally and physically fit for continued service, and that your decision to leave was, quote, a significant loss to the program. A pause. He also noted you had specifically requested that your record remain sealed and that no commendations be formally processed. "I remember what I requested," Lena said. "I know." Wren's voice carried something that wasn't quite sympathy, more like recognition, the specific tone of someone who understood a decision without necessarily agreeing with it. "I'm here because the events of the last 4 days have created a situation where your record can no longer remain practically sealed, even if it remains officially classified." She opened the folder to a specific page and turned it so Lena could read it. 3 federal agents filed reports that reference your actions. Marcus Hale's certified statement mentions you by name in the context of both the diner incident and the hospital coordination. A county security guard filed an incident report. 2 FBI agents will be filing commendation recommendations. She looked up. "Your name is in federal records, in a county record, and in a certified legal document. The sealed record is still sealed, but the person described in those documents does not match the personnel file that Drumlin County Regional has on you." "No one at this hospital asked about my service record when I was hired," Lena said. "I listed it as military service, medical specialist. That's accurate." "It's accurate," Wren agreed. "It's also incomplete in a way that is no longer sustainable." She paused. "We're not here to expose you. We're here because the Joint Medical Command has a formal process for this situation, and because you deserve to know what's happening before it happens without your input." Ostrowski, who had been quiet until now, set a separate document on the table. "What Major Wren is describing," he said, "is a formal unsealing of the commendation record. Not the classified operational record, that stays. But the commendations, the evaluations, the saves, those become part of your accessible personnel record." He looked at her. "It requires your signature. You can decline." Lena looked at this document. She looked at the folder. She looked at her own hands on the table, which were the same hands they had always been, scarred at the left knuckle from a suture needle years ago, the right thumbnail slightly uneven from a door she hadn't seen closing fast enough during a deployment she was not going to name in this room. "If I decline," she said, "what happens to the federal reports that already reference me?" "They stay as they are," Ostrowski said. "Your name is in them. Your actions are described. But the context, the background that explains those actions, remains inaccessible to anyone without top-level clearance." He paused. "Which means, in practical terms, that the people who read those reports continue to see a nurse who stopped 6 men in a parking lot and then spent 4 days navigating a federal investigation, and have no framework for why that's possible." "Some of them have already figured it out," Lena said. Allwell looked further. Duval said the same. Yes, Wren said. And when people with clearance look further and find a sealed file, they make inferences. The inferences are usually correct. But inferences are not record. She sat back slightly. You spent 7 years doing work that no one will ever fully know about. That was your choice, and we honored it. The commendations are different. They're not about the classified work. They're about what you did, medically, for specific people in specific moments, and those people are still alive, and that should be on record somewhere. The room was quiet. Through the wall, she could hear the muffled sounds of the ER. A PA announcement, a cart moving, the ordinary percussion of a building devoted to keeping people alive. She thought about the 23. She did not think about them often, because thinking about them carefully meant also thinking about the ones she hadn't been able to help. And the ratio was better than it should have been, and still not something she carried lightly. She had made her peace with all of it in the specific way you made peace with things that didn't fully resolve, by putting them somewhere you could access without being destroyed by them, and leaving them there. She picked up the pen. She signed. The formal unsealing took 48 hours to process through the appropriate channels. Lena knew this because Ostrowski called her Thursday morning to confirm it was done, using the same careful professional tone he had used in the consultation room, and then added before hanging up, "For what it's worth, the evaluators who reviewed your field record, none of them said anything like what I expected. They were very quiet for a while, and then one of them said, it was the most sustained demonstration of medical competence under pressure they had ever reviewed." A pause. "I thought you should know." She thanked him and went back to her shift. Victor Raines's cooperation with the federal investigation lasted 9 days before his attorneys concluded it was producing more damage than protection and advised him to stop. By then it was too late. The cooperation period had yielded detailed corroboration of Marcus's documentation. The supply chain had been fully mapped, and 3 additional criminal networks in 2 adjacent counties had been identified and referred to the appropriate field offices. The billing record cross-reference, the records that Sandra Polk had been processing for 18 months, established a financial conspiracy that was, as Duval put it in his call to Lena, the kind of paper trail that makes prosecutors very happy and defense attorneys very quiet. Raines was charged with 21 counts. The charges included conspiracy, trafficking, intimidation of witnesses, and the attempted murder of Marcus Hale on Route 7. The Route 7 charge was the one that carried mandatory minimums that made the others almost academic, and it was the one that Raines's attorney had the least to work with because the vehicle analysis had found paint transfer on Marcus's car that matched a vehicle registered to one of Raines's associates, and that associate had decided very quickly that being the person who provided the vehicle was a different legal category than being the person who drove it. Gary Fulton, the name in Westbrook's financial records, the man whose SUV had paced Lena on Route 9, was apprehended 2 days after the warehouse operation at a motel outside Nashville. He had been Westbrook's private cleanup operative for 6 years, handling the specific problems that couldn't go through official channels, but was charged separately, and Westbrook's cooperation agreement was substantially revised when the full scope of what Fulton had done on Westbrook's behalf became clear. The revision was not favorable to Westbrook. The press conference Westbrook had given, the one where he stood very straight and talked about integrity, as Gerald had narrated through the break room door, became, within a week, a piece of documentary evidence used to demonstrate the calculated nature of his deception. The State Attorney General's office, which he had claimed to have contacted with his findings, confirmed they had received no such contact. His attorneys argued that the press conference was aspirational rather than factual. The judge, at the preliminary hearing, looked at the attorneys with an expression that suggested she found this argument creative in a way that was not complimentary. Westbrook pleaded guilty 8 weeks later. He received 7 years. Raines went to trial. Lena was called as a witness for 3 of the 21 counts: the diner incident, the hospital situation, and the events of the morning at the warehouse, in which her presence on the public road and her actions in positioning her car had been captured by a traffic camera and subsequently entered into evidence. She testified twice. Both times she answered exactly what she was asked, no more, in the same even tone she used for everything, and twice the defense attorneys attempted lines of questioning designed to characterize her presence in these situations as suspicious or coordinated, and twice she explained without heat that she had been getting coffee, checking on a patient, and driving to work, respectively, and that the rest was circumstance. The jury convicted on 19 of 21 counts. The two acquittals were on charges where the evidence chain had a gap that couldn't be closed without testimony that wasn't available. Raines's attorney considered this a partial victory. Raines, based on his expression when the verdict was read, did not appear to share this assessment. He was sentenced to 22 years. Lena was not in the courtroom for the sentencing. She was in the ER, which was where she was on most days, and she heard about it from Duval, who called her during her lunch break with the particular voice of a man closing a file that had been open for a long time. 22, he said. Okay, she said. That's all you've got? I've got soup that's getting cold, she said, and a femur fracture follow-up in Bay 3. She paused. But yes, good. It's good. It is, he said. You should know. The official case summary cites your actions as materially contributing to the investigation's success at 3 distinct points. That's unusual language for a civilian. I'm a nurse who was in the wrong place at the right time. You're whatever you want to call yourself, Duval said. I call you someone I'd want on my team. She ate her soup. What? Marcus was discharged from Drumlin County Regional 11 days after he'd been brought in on the gurney from Route 7. His ribs were healing on schedule. The vascular sutures had been removed cleanly at day 8. He walked out of the building on a Tuesday morning with a bag that his assistant Darnell Briggs carried for him, and Lena happened to be finishing a chart at the nurses' station near the main exit when they came through. Hey, Marcus said. You look better than you did, she said. Then when I came in on a gurney, low bar. I meant than yesterday. He smiled. It was a real one, crooked and a little tired. The program, he said, the military surplus contact you mentioned. Sergeant First Class Raylene Okafor, out of Fort Campbell. She's been in medical logistics for 14 years. I called her last week. She's interested in talking. Lena handed him a card, actual paper, because she had written the number on it in her handwriting, which was the kind of handwriting produced by someone who had spent years writing field notes fast and didn't bother making it look careful. She knows about veterans programs. She'll understand what you need. Marcus took the card and looked at it. You wrote this in advance, he said, before I was discharged. I wrote it when I knew you'd be discharged, yes. He looked up at her. You planned ahead for the program. The program was never the problem. The program is the part that matters. She closed the chart she was holding. The supply chain disruption is a logistical problem. Logistical problems have solutions. Go build something. Darnell, standing slightly behind Marcus with the bag, caught her eye. He looked like his brother Tyler, same build, same nervous energy, but quieter. He nodded at her. It was a small thing, a simple thing, but it carried the weight of a man who understood specifically what the 60 hours had meant and what could have happened in them and hadn't. She nodded back. Marcus put the card in his pocket. He offered his hand and she shook it, and his grip was the grip of someone whose hands had built things for decades, still strong under the current evidence of damage. Thank you, he said, for all of it. Go home, she said. Rest. Your ribs need 6 weeks. I know. I mean it. 6 weeks, not 4. He left, and she went back to work. The conversation with Dr. Ashworth happened on a Wednesday, 3 weeks after the sentencing, in his office rather than the corridor, which was itself a different kind of conversation. He had a corner office with a window that looked out over the hospital's east garden, which was a small and struggling thing that someone had planted with good intentions, and that survived on whatever attention the facility's staff could give it between more urgent priorities. He had her file on his desk, not her HR file, something printed, a few pages, with a header she recognized as Joint Medical Command letterhead. I received this, he said, with a cover letter from a Major Wren explaining that it had been cleared for appropriate distribution to current employers in light of recent events. He looked at her. I'm choosing to read appropriate distribution as meaning I should read it rather than file it without opening. That's probably the right call, Lena said. He read it in silence. She sat across from him and looked at the garden outside. Someone had recently pruned the shrubs, which had helped. When he finished, he set it down and was quiet for a moment. You've been here for 3 years, he said. Yes. In 3 years, you have never been late, never had a patient complaint that wasn't resolved at the department level, never escalated a personal conflict, and never missed a continuing education requirement. He looked at her. You are also apparently one of the most comprehensively trained field medical practitioners that Joint Medical Command has on record. Former, she said. I've been out for 8 years. The skills don't expire, he said. I work in medicine. I know how this works. He sat back. I told HR to close the inquiry. You know that. You mentioned it. I also spoke to the administrator about the billing records. He paused. She appreciated the early warning. It allowed the hospital to come out of this without liability rather than inside it. He tapped the file. You could have kept your head down. You're good at keeping your head down. You've been doing it for 3 years. I tried, she said. What changed? She thought about this, about the specific moment in the parking lot at the Hollow Creek Diner when she had stood up from the stool and walked toward the door instead of staying at the counter. There had not been a decision, exactly. More like the absence of the alternative. The realization that the person who could walk past 6 men surrounding an older one had never fully existed in her, regardless of how carefully she had constructed her life around that possibility. Nothing changed, she said. I just stopped pretending it had. Ashworth looked at her for a long moment. He had the expression of a man who was revising a model he had carried for a long time, and who was doing it honestly rather than grudgingly. I owe you an apology, he said. The morning after the diner, I implied that your actions, however justified, were primarily a liability issue. You were doing your job. I was doing the institutional version of my job, he said, which is not always the same thing as the right version. He paused. I'd like to offer you something, not as an apology, as a proposal. The hospital is in the process of establishing a trauma response program with the County Veteran Services Office. Joint, medical, and logistical. We need someone who can bridge both sides, medical practice and veteran-specific needs. He looked at her steadily. It's a coordinator position. You'd still be in the ER for your primary rotation. The coordinator work would be structured around that. It's more hours, and the additional pay is not what it should be, and I'll be honest about that. Lena looked at the garden outside, the pruned shrubs, the small determined plot of growing things that survived on inadequate attention and kept going anyway. When does it start? She said. When you say yes. She looked at him. Yes, she said. The Hollow Creek Diner was the same. It was always going to be the same, the laminated menus, the coffee that came too hot or not hot enough, the neon sign buzzing softly above the door. Dolores was behind the counter. The parking lot had the same gravel, the same wide space for trucks to turn around. It was a Saturday evening in late November, the first cold weekend of the season. The kind of night where the sky came down dark and close, and the lights inside a diner looked warm from the parking lot. Lena pulled in and sat in the car for a moment. She had been here once since the night that started all of it. That was the night she had slept on the folding cot in the back room, listening to the walk-in cooler hum, before driving to Millhaven and everything that followed. This was different. This was deliberate. She went inside and took the same stool at the counter. Dolores poured the coffee without being asked and set it down. You're back, Dolores said. I wanted to finish the pie, Lena said. Dolores looked at her for a moment. Then she went to the back and came out with a slice of cherry, which was not what she had ordered the first time and was also exactly what she wanted now. She set it down with the particular economy of a woman who had been feeding people for 40 years and understood that sometimes the gesture was the thing. Things settled? Dolores asked. Mostly. Lena picked up her fork. Still some loose ends. Always are. Yes. She ate a bite of the pie. It was genuinely good. Not complicated, not trying to be anything other than what it was. You called the police that night, when everyone else was looking at their phones. I poured the coffee first, Dolores said. Then I called. In that order? The coffee was already poured, she shrugged. Priorities. Lena almost laughed. Not the polite kind. Something real, briefly, in the way real things were brief when they arrived unexpectedly. She ate the pie and drank the coffee and looked at the parking lot through the window. Empty now except for a few trucks and someone's minivan with a cracked taillight that might have been the same one as before or a different one entirely. She couldn't tell. It didn't matter. It was an ordinary parking lot on an ordinary evening, and nobody was standing in it performing calm. Nobody was making a calculation about which way the math worked, Nobody was driving away in the quiet, careful way that was more dangerous than loud. Just a parking lot, just a diner, just coffee and pie, the neon sign buzzing. Booked. She thought, driving home that night on the road she had driven 1,000 times, about what it meant to carry something for a long time. Not the skills. The skills were just tools. They existed in the body the way medical knowledge existed in the mind, available or not, depending on what was needed, neither noble nor shameful in themselves. What she had carried was the decision about them. The decision to put them away, to close that life and build a different one, to become the person in the scrubs who was kind and hardworking and easy to overlook. That decision had not been wrong. She had needed what that life gave her. The stability, the patient work, the particular satisfaction of nursing, which was real and which she had never performed. She was not going back on that. But the night at the Hollow Creek Diner had exposed something she had not fully admitted. She had not put any of it away. She had organized it, stored it, carried it so efficiently that she had mistaken the weight for absence. And when Marcus Hale had been standing in a parking lot with nowhere to go, her body had known before her conscious mind caught up that the inventory was intact. The question she had been sitting with, the one that didn't have a clean answer, was whether that was a failure or a resource. Whether 8 years of trying to be unremarkable was time lost or time that had put her in an ER in a county where a man needed help, where a network of harm had been running long enough that the people whose job it was to stop it were still building their case, where a diner had a folding cot in the back room and a counter with good pie and a woman who poured the coffee first and called the police second. She didn't resolve it on the drive home. She wasn't sure it was the kind of thing that resolved. Some things you carried, and the carrying was not the same as being crushed by them, and the distinction was what you made of the weight. What she knew was this: she was going to be in the ER on Monday. She was going to coordinate the veteran trauma program starting in the new year. She was going to call Raylene Okafor again to check that Marcus had followed up, because he was the kind of person who built things for other people and sometimes needed someone to check that he was also building the things that were just for him. She was going to drink better coffee than the hospital provided because she had decided, finally, that the bad coffee was not a sacrifice worth making. She was going to walk into every room she walked into and be exactly who she was. Not a version of it, not the organized, stored, carried version, the actual one. Well, 3 months later, on a Wednesday morning that was cold and bright, Drumlin County Regional held a small ceremony in the hospital's conference room to mark the launch of the Veteran Trauma Coordination Program. Small meant 20 people. Department heads, county veteran services representatives, a woman from Joint Medical Command named Major Wren, who had driven 2 hours for a 30-minute ceremony and would drive 2 hours back, and Darnell Briggs, who had come in his capacity as Marcus Hale's assistant, and who stood in the back of the room with the quiet presence of someone who had learned not to take mornings for granted. Marcus was there. He had driven himself, which his ribs were technically cleared to allow, and which he had not entirely waited for clearance to start doing. He sat in the front row with the careful posture of someone whose body was still negotiating with recent damage, and he watched the proceedings with the expression of a man who was recording something he wanted to remember. Dr. Ashworth introduced Lena to the room. He did not use words like heroic or extraordinary, which she had specifically asked him not to, and he honored that request with what she considered genuine respect. What he said was, "Ms. Carter has been a member of this department for 3 years. In that time, she has demonstrated what good medicine looks like, not in theory, but in practice, in conditions that required it. This program exists because of her understanding of what veterans need from a medical system and what a medical system owes to the people who have served in it. I'm glad she's here." It was not a speech that would have moved most audiences, but it was true, and true was what she had asked for, and the room understood the weight of what was not being said in the specific way that rooms understand things when the person being described has earned the understatement. She spoke for 4 minutes. She talked about the program, the practical details, the referral structure, the coordination with veteran services, the things that could be measured. She did not talk about herself. At the end, she said, "The people this program is built for spent years being useful in ways that most of us will never see.